Okay, I will I'll call the meeting to order here at 9:04 or 9:05 this morning. And as delegates and guests to the meeting today, you all would have received with your package and Zoom link an agenda for today. And I guess I will now ask for a motion to first of all, quickly, if there was any other additions to the agenda. If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda for today.
Mike Clark, motions.
Mike Clark.
Chuck Fossey,
Mike?
I'll second.
Pardon me?
Chuck Fossey, I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Yeah, if you, when we put the motion in second, if you can say your name and organization or district you're representing, that'd be great for our note takers today.
Mike Clark is Manitoba Beekeepers Association.
Thank you, Mike.
Chuck Fossey, District 6.
Thank you, Chuck. Okay. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, I will declare that motion carried. We will now move on to the minutes of our last advisory council meeting, which would have been back in March. I will entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
Shannon Piziak, District 10, move to accept.
Thank you, Shannon. And I have Les Ferris has his hand up to second that motion from District 2. Thank you, Les.
About an update, Jill, on District 7 from the last minute.
Okay, we will put that into other business. We can discuss that at then.
Okay, thank you. I will second the motion then.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'll just, yeah, your hand's down now. Okay, are there any opposed to that motion? And I see that motion has carried. Thank you very much. We will move on to, I just have some brief remarks since our last advisory council meeting. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our summer meeting. And if you don't know, my name is Jill Verwey, and I'm currently president of Keystone Agricultural Producers. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to attend today's meeting. And I know that whether you're growing crops, raising livestock, or producing any one of our other amazing products in Manitoba, it is hard to find time to get away from the farm. So I certainly appreciate everyone attending today. Today we have an exciting agenda in front of us, including a presentation from RBC on.
From the song.
Oh, sorry, if I can get everyone to mute their microphones. We're just getting a little bit of feedback. Thank you. Again, we're going to hear from RBC on sustainability requirements when it comes to us accessing capital and lending. We're also going to hear from tax expert from BDO with his analysis on the potential impact of the recent capital gains tax changes on farming operations here in Canada. Additionally, we'll have some resolutions. They were sent out in the package that will be up for discussion, as well as a consideration of a new group member application from the Manitoba Nursery and Landscape Association. First, I'd like to provide a little bit of an update on the past few months since we met back in March. This growing season, again, has been variable across the province with very high performing and promising crops in many areas of the province, but also there are some areas of the province, again, that are suffering from excess moisture, unseeded acres, and again, stress for this growing season. In our recent meeting with Manitoba Crop Insurance, you know, we're at about 95% seeded acres in the province, but certainly there are some areas of the province that again are being stressed with a lot of excess moisture. Those particular areas of note are in the Dauphin area, and again in the Inner Lake area, particularly Arborg and Fisher Branch. And I don't want to admit anyone, because I know that there are other areas that definitely in the province are suffering with that additional excess moisture. So not that we're missing out, those are a few of the areas that have been hit hard. These areas are seeing large number of acres going unseeded, and we're working continually to ensure that there's some support to those producers and their challenges are addressed. The provincial budget, we also have seen both the provincial and federal budget take place in the spring. On the provincial front, we're pleased to see that the 50% education tax rebate maintained for farm properties, but still encourage the province to continue to work towards complete removal of that tax from farm properties. We're happy to see that 1.5 million funding increase to the apprenticeship seating training seats, and investment in support of implementation of a provincial vet strategy that KAP has helped develop. Additionally, the increase of the health budget was also appreciated. Other highlights included the reopening of two MAS, the Manitoba Agriculture Centers, and creating a livestock predation prevention strategy, extension of the gas tax by 3 months, freezing of ag crown land lease rates, and again, support to our young farmers. KAP would like to have seen further investment, of course, in highways and in infrastructure, prioritized through increased capital funding. As well, the legislature amendments would enable the right to repair for farmers. Further development there. On the federal front, the budget did have some positive investments in the sector, such as a recommitment to the launch of consultants in interoperability, carbon tax rebates for small businesses, and previously funding for temporary improvement to the advanced payment program. However,
Sorry, Jill, you're muted.
how much did we miss, Colin? Sorry.
You were talking about the budget, I think, and interoperability.
Yeah, just about 30 seconds. If we could get Ingrid, the MB Sheep, to be muted, please. Your mic is open.
Okay, thank you for mentioning that. Interoperability. Okay. However, it's unclear. There were some advances, of course, we don't know how the carbon tax rebates for small businesses are going to impact farmers. And there were, again, temporary improvements to the advanced payments program. So going back up to the 250,000 interest-free. It's unclear whether or not farms will have broad access to these rebates. And there's no mention of pivotal issues for the sector, such investments in environment programming, chronic labor issues on food production, and improvements to transportation and trade infrastructure. Additionally, while there is an increase to the lifetime capital gains exemption, the increase to the inclusion rate presents challenges to intergenerational farm sales that will cost producers selling their farms more money and tax payable when they retire. I'm happy that Shawn Friesen from BDO is here to kind of discuss some of those impacts and any questions that you might have later today. In the last, since we last met in April, I traveled with a trade mission to Washington with the Premier, Minister Moses, Minister Naylor, and a few members of the Premier's Business and Jobs Council from the business community. The goal of this mission for the provincial delegation was to strengthen Manitoba's relationship with partners across the United States. We met with many different groups and officials, as well as representatives from agriculture in the group. It was my goal to ensure that it's clear that our sector is a priority for Manitoba's economy, and to emphasize that we are in fact the key player in U.S. trade activity. This is something that I was pleased to see promoted in our discussions, along with our other Manitoba-made resources and solutions like our low carbon hydroelectricity energy. Some of the key issues that we discussed were based on maintaining a positive and mutual beneficial trade relationship between Canada with the United States. Overall, agriculture is recognized by all groups we met with a priority sector that drives our respective economies while providing Americans with access to safe, nutritious, affordable food. Next, in my recent travels, we went north to Churchill and to Whitehorse. I was pleased to travel north on 2 occasions recently with our general manager, Brenna. I traveled to Churchill with the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce to explore the economic opportunities in the region, including the Port of Churchill. We've had great discussions with other business leaders and learned about the work being done in Churchill. We traveled recently to Whitehorse alongside the KAP executive for the FPT meetings, as well as our summer meeting for the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. We were part of the Manitoba delegation. It was a great experience to host Minister Macaulay through the Canadian Federation of Agriculture's roundtable event, as well as the many ministers and senators across the country. Discussion topics included enhanced collaboration between the regions, AI, data in agriculture was a big emphasis, as that was our main talking point in the roundtable, and going forward with ensured investment in that area, pesticide working group, and much more. Thanks again for everyone being here today, and I look forward to a positive meeting filled with robust discussion. We'll now move on to some operation of financial and membership update. I will be providing that update. Jake will be connecting with us as he is traveling right now. It'll be there isn't a slide for this, so it's a 6-month picture on where we are as far as revenues and expenses for KAP. So total revenue to the end of April, which represents half a year, is 1.160 million. Total expenditures of 1.194 for a modest deficit for the period of $34,000. Both of those figures, we are on target with our budget, representing 50% of our budget. And a couple notes just on the funding. We have received our SCAP funding through the federal 5-year program of $1.5 million over 5 years for the Farm Safe program. So that's definitely a win for Keystone agricultural producers and farmers, because that is something that we've been asking for as commitment. We also have supporter revenue on the Farm Safe side from Manitoba Pork that's included, and we were on budget again for AGM, even though we've had some additional expenses there. At the end of April, we do show that modest deficit, but anticipating shifting out of that deficit surplus once we receive our funding from Farm Safe Manitoba, as well as commodity group memberships and funding from our corporate sponsors. So again, we're in a good, very strong position at the end of 6 months. On the membership side, we're sitting currently year to date members of 3,890 and supporters of 809. So year over year, we're actually up compared to the prior year, even considering that the small number of opt-outs, but total numbers are up year over year. So that is the membership report. We will now pivot to our operations report. Unfortunately, Brenna is not able to attend today. If you can tell by my voice, being in close proximity with in excess of 200 people has brought about bugs from across Canada. So she unfortunately has been very ill this week. And I'm fighting to get through that. I see Lorna on the call, and I'm hoping that you did not catch what everybody else caught on the meeting. But unfortunately, Brenna isn't here, and we hope that she gets well soon. But I will turn it over to Colin and Neil to provide operations report from the KAP office. And I'll mute myself.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks everyone for being here today. I won't take too long here. I'm just gonna try and pull the operations report that you would have received in your membership package onto the screen. Emily's just gonna get that up there in 1 second. But just while we're waiting, so that report goes up to early June, early to mid-June. So just a few things that that may not be included in there. Jill and I met with, she had mentioned we met with MASC yesterday or the day before. Hopefully I didn't catch what she has, crossing my fingers because I'm going away soon. But so we had a good discussion with their new board that was just recently appointed in the last year. So that was a good discussion just to kind of go over who we are, what we're doing, some of our priorities as an organization, and to meet the new board members. Additionally, coming up, we do have a meeting with the Minister of Education scheduled in the next month to talk about the education funding model, just going back to Jill's comment around seeing that 50% reduction in the education property tax on farmland maintained. And there is a new model coming out, a funding model, sometime in the near future. So we've engaged with the Minister of Education, and he's been open to meeting with us. So that's something we'll be doing in the short next while. And Emily, I'm not sure if we are able to get that report up there yet, but we will just give it 1 second. And maybe while we're waiting, I can just talk as well about the roundtable we hosted with the Governor of the Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklem. So we hosted an event. We had individuals from across the sector. We had it was mostly producers who attended that. So we had representatives, producer members. Jill was there, and Jake from our board, Jeneth, was there. We had some industry folks as well. Cantera Seeds participated in that. We had the Grain Elevators Association, High Life, dairy farmers. So there was quite a few groups there. So we kept it to around 10 to 12 people. And we had a very good discussion with the governor. And as many of you'll know, the Bank of Canada is going to be, they set the rates. So talking a lot about the impact of interest rates on producers. And it was also for the governor to get a kind of feel of the industry. What are some of the kind of issues that we have going on? Because that kind of helps him inform his decisions and his understanding of the industry. So I just wanted to mention that briefly. I'll talk now, just the operations report you all did receive in your package. So firstly, just to go to the advocacy hub there on the next there, we have a newer since we met last in March. So this is our advocacy hub, where I would encourage everybody to go take a look on our website. This has all of our submissions for the past few years, and we are going to make sure that we update that as often as possible. Oh, Glenn's saying the rates came down this morning. That's good. I haven't had a chance to read the news yet. On the advocacy hub there, that'll have all our policy submissions. So that would be of interest to folks to see, and gives you an idea as well of some of those key issues that we're focused on, such as, right to repairs on there, property tax on farmland, supply chain network, etc. So moving on to the next page, Emily. Advocacy, that just gives you a snapshot of some of the meetings we had. So we've really tried to, since the spring, try and engage as much as possible across all parties. So we've been able to meet with many of the different political parties on the federal front and the provincial front as well. We also have been meeting with the department staff where it's important. Issues such as there was some regulatory challenges when it comes to large tanks with propane tanks. So that's something we've been working with the Propane Association on, as well as the Road Debris Working Group we are members of. And then we'll have our second meeting coming up in the next week. And that's to talk about how we can work across industries with RCMP, with the transportation and infrastructure, and many other stakeholders to talk about debris on roads and how we can make sure we have safe roadways for all users, as well as the Coalition of Manitoba Motorcycle Groups as part of that discussion. Moving to the next section here. This is just kind of, Jill talked about her trip to Washington. So that was something that was a great experience, and we're happy that she's been included and able to represent agriculture on a national front. And some of the highlights for our consultations you'll see there as well. Next page there, please, Emily. This is just some of the other engagements in our key advocacy priorities. So as you can see, we've been fairly busy trying to meet with other industry groups, other associations, engaged with post-secondary, Red River College is on there, a few others. In terms of advocacy priorities, Neil may talk about this as well, but the rail strike is something we've been closely monitoring. We know that there is a decision pending from the Canadian Industrial Relations Board's analysis, as well as there's a new Minister of Labor. So I'm not sure if the new minister is going to delay that decision or not. But that's something we're watching and working through CFA with, as well as directly with the railways, to make sure we're updated on. And moving on to the next, just some of the engagement and outreach we've done in the past while. Whether that be that roundtable with the Bank of Canada I mentioned. We also have been doing stuff with the Canadian Ag Human Resource Council, bringing together Manitoba stakeholders and looking at the national labor strategy that they've put together and say, okay, in the Manitoba context, how does this work? So we hosted a group in Winnipeg to talk about that. We've been trying to make sure we get out to as many of our partner and member events as we can. So we're up in Dauphin at the Farm Outlook. I went with Brenna and Jill. We tried to go to as many of the AGMs as we could. Pork, turkey, egg in the classroom. Neil went to Saskatoon to the Grain Act Summit that took place there. And we are 1 week out from our golf tournament. So looking forward to having everyone out at that. That was sold out and with a waiting list. So that was very positive. We had lots of interest and engagement for that. Moving on to the next part. I know I would just mention as well, there is some continued efforts to look at how we can streamline the checkoff process and internally, as well as with designated purchasers. So that's something that Shawn has been working on significantly. This is just a snapshot of the media. Again, some of those issues we've been talking about in the media. And I know I have some of our friends from the media here as well who I'm engaged with frequently. So talking about the budget, how the weather, impact of weather, just seating updates and talking about that trade mission, labor, vet shortage, etc. And we've been trying to talk to as many media outlets as possible. Moving on to the next page here. As Jill mentioned, the funding we received through SCAP for the Farm Safe Manitoba program. So we're in that second year of the program, looking at how do we continue to grow the resources, make sure we connect with more producers, as this is a service that some producers are still not aware does exist. So we're trying to figure out what are those ways we can try and make sure that every producer has the opportunity to take advantage of free farm safety services where they are available. We did host the farm's farm-specific first aid training. So thank you to Manitoba canola growers for supporting that activity. That was a free first aid certification program that we did as well to celebrate Farm Safety Week in Manitoba, in Canada. So that's something that's a model that we are going to look at expanding potentially into other types of training, depending on what folks are interested in. So whether that be other practical safety training or on-farm safety training days, we will keep everyone posted on what we're looking for moving ahead. I think I already mentioned the Road Safety Week, the Road Debris Working Group. So that's something that again, our second meeting is coming up. And we've been able to talk to the minister about things like this and the importance of funding initiatives like Farm Safe Manitoba. And the last page here, just talking about the EFP continuing to produce promotional products. We did put together a video for the EFP that was should be out soon if it's not already. And on labor, Brenna's very focused on this priority, I know, and so we've been working closely with the Veterinary Association and some other folks around engaging with those students to make sure that the students at the Western College from Manitoba come back to Manitoba, and how can we address the labor shortage or the veterinary shortage here, which is a global issue, but something that we're trying to focus on. How can we deal with that? So we were pleased to see funding in the last provincial budget to support the additional 5-step seats for that, and the unfunded students as well at the WCVM. And continuing to work through that with other groups through our coalition, our partner groups. Additionally, the pathway program, we've been working through Manitoba Agriculture, MLE, Protein MB, and Ag in the Classroom on that. That's again something Brenna has been working closely with them on. And yeah, just continuing to really outreach and advocate for, making sure people know that agriculture is a career option for lots of young people, and agriculture is more than just on the farm. It's everything. It kind of feeds into our advocacy theme of agriculture matters, whether you're on a farm or not. It's all around us, whether you're selling mortgages to farmers or financial products, or if you're working on farm, or if you're doing anything, you're fixing their car or anything, right? You can thank agriculture for those jobs. So I'm going to just kick it over to Neil quickly. I know he had a couple of slides. He wanted to just touch on some of our consultations and some of the more policy work. So.
Okay, thanks, Colin. So I'll briefly go through some of the things that we've been working on relating to policy in the last couple of months. Right to repair. There was a private consulting group that came out with a survey on the right to repair. We provided feedback on that. The Government of Canada recently announced consultation on the right to repair. We plan on giving our feedback to this. This relates to the government's bill C-244 on the right to repair as it moves through the Senate. The next one is the Safe Food for Canadians Act. This is an act that deals with inspection, labeling, and the movement of food commodities. It requires a review every 5 years. We recommended to the CFIA that regulatory sandboxes be permitted under the Act. This would allow industry to test out new ideas as well as drive innovation within the sector. The next topic deals with building code amendments. The Canadian Board for Harmonized Construction Code is the board responsible for making amendments to the National Building Code. They came forward with proposed amendments that could negatively impact greenhouses and the building of livestock buildings. KAP, CFA, along with other organizations, provided feedback to the board, highlighting our concerns with the proposed amendments. After feedback was given, the board came out and rescinded these amendments affecting agriculture. Seed regulatory modernization. The CFIA is currently undergoing a multi-year review on modernizing the seeds regulations. The past consultation dealt with a variety of policy topics such as variety cancellation, eligibility, seed testing, as well as the creation of advisory committee. We anticipate that a more complete version of these amendments will be proposed in the Canada Gazette sometime next year. Plant breeders' rights, also under the realm of the CFIA, they are proposing amendments to the plant breeders' rights regulations. These amendments deal with farmers' privilege, the length of plant breeder protection, cost of application filings. Most of these changes are largely reflective of current practices that are already done in the industry. So we're supportive of these changes. Disaster Financial Assistance Program. This is a program offered by the provincial government to cover widespread disaster. It's a cost-sharing program between the federal and provincial government. We're providing feedback to this current consultation. We're talking about areas relating to the definition of eligible farm business, increasing $2 million revenue cap, improving wait times, and ensuring that there's consistency and clarity between federal and provincial policies. The last one deals with anhydrous ammonia. Transport Canada is currently proposing amendments to the transportation of dangerous goods regulations. These proposed amendments would make it more costly for farmers to transport anhydrous ammonia if they own their own nurse tanks. We're working with the Grain Growers of Canada, CFA, and a number of other organizations to submit a joint letter to Transport Canada outlining our concerns relating to these amendments. So that's it for the policy, and I'll hand it back to Jill.
Oh, I missed the good part. Oh, well.
Oh, thank you very much, Neil and Colin, for the update. And now I guess I'm very pleased to introduce Lorna, which we met again in beautiful Whitehorse. And she's the National Director of Agriculture with RBC Royal Bank. And on her topic on ESG and sustainable financing in agriculture, I'd like to welcome Lorna.
Well, thanks so much, everybody, for having us here today. So if you happen to bank with RBC, you know that we do kind of travel in packs, and we surround our clients with the team. And so that's what I've done today too, is that I've brought in 2 team members with me that are experts in the ESG and sustainable front. So me, myself, I'm the National Director of Agriculture for Royal Bank. And what that means is that I bring the team across the country together as far as policy, procedure, marketing, and just overall commitment to the sector. I've worked for Royal Bank for the past 27 years, and over 25 of that's been in agriculture. I live on a crop farm outside Seaforth, Ontario, which is just the other side of Stratford, for anybody who is wondering. And I'm raising the 7th generation of on my husband's family farm. So with me today, I brought Lisa Ashton. She's the oh, you can switch back to you. I brought Lisa Ashton, who's the Ag Policy Lead for the RBC Climate Action Institute, and that's the thought leadership group that RBC created that reports directly into the office of the CEO. Lisa recently joined this team and has a really interesting background, having previously worked for Grain Farmers of Ontario, and has a PhD in the governance of climate solutions in Canadian agriculture. And she grew up on a crop farm just outside Chatham, Ontario. And then the second team member that I brought with me is Mikael Lahura, and he is the Vice President of Commercial Banking in our Sustainable Finance Group. And this is a group that was created in the last year to help our commercial and our corporate clients with sustainable finance solutions. So his background is in that corporate finance, and he has worked with ag clients in the past. Also on the line, I've got a bunch of our RBC Ag team in Manitoba on the line too. So all here to support you and help you. So I thought I'd start today, if you want to switch the slide, Lisa, to the next one, with the ESG, how our RBC kind of approaches our ESG reporting and how we think about it. And so ESG is the reporting and investments we make outside of our day-to-day business, which is banking and finance, obviously. So we do have RBC has a long history of supporting environmental, social, and government causes and initiatives. And in recent years, we've really accelerated that to think about our goal of creating long-term and sustainable value for our stakeholders. So we would say our purpose is to help clients thrive and communities prosper. So included in that is a lot of societal challenges that could really impact our collective success. So, which we believe is critical to the prosperity of the communities where we live and we work. So in 2023, we developed what's called the Purpose Framework, powering ideas for people and the planet. And it aims to help create clarity and structure when it comes to 3 societal ambitions that RBC believes we can have a meaningful impact on. So then alongside those is the societal challenges. We wanted to focus our ambitions on 3 mutually reinforcing places. And that's to accelerate the transition to a greener economy, to equip people with skills for a thriving future, and to drive more equitable prosperity in our communities. So we know there's a lot of societal challenges out there, and as a bank with resources we could help address. But our ESG ambitions were focused where we feel that it's meaningful for both our business we're in and where we operate. And they're directly connected to the continued success of our organization and the country as a whole. So these are the guiding principles for the entire organization when we're thinking about donations, investments, and just general supportive initiatives. So that's where RBC is. And now I'm going to turn it over to Miguel, who's going to take us through what that means from a reporting perspective.
Perfect. Thank you, Lorna. Yeah, so as she mentioned, you know, the primary point of my job is really on the structuring and execution of sustainable finance transaction. But a big piece of that is actually providing ESG advisory to clients and supporting them to achieve their longer term ESG ambitions and goals. One of the main topics that we discuss and help clients navigate is ESG disclosures or ESG reporting. Just to give you the 10,000-foot view, you know, for a long time, there was no consensus in terms of what companies should be reporting on, how they should be reporting, and who should be reporting. And the big change was that last year, you have the ISSB, which stands for the International Sustainability Standards Board. They partnered with IFRS, a globally recognized accounting firm, to publish a sustainable framework called the IFRS S1 and S2, which really what it does is encapsulates what businesses should be reporting on, which covers climate and environmentally related risks and opportunities. Now, although it's been recognized as the global standard, it's still up to each country to decide how they're implementing that. So taking a look at Canada, earlier this year, there was the formation of the CSSB, so the Canadian Sustainability Standards Board, and they've launched a public review of that framework to decide, you know, how they would look to implement it here. Hopefully, they're going to provide some guidance by the end of the year, and whatever that recommendation is would end up having to go to the regulators again. But to maybe give you a baseline of what we're seeing, in the United States, the SEC has ruled that that framework is going to be mandatory for all public companies. And part of that reporting includes reporting on Scope 1 and 2 emissions when deemed material. And Scope 3 is voluntary unless deemed material. And I'll get into those details in a little bit. But giving you another point, you have the state of California that have taken a much more strong stance. So they've made it mandatory for both public and private names. There is a revenue threshold of $1 billion, but they're including reporting on Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And so it's a much broader view. We don't know at this point what Canada is going to take. Oh, there's a bit of feedback there, sorry. We don't know at this point what Canada is going to decide. I think it's in our opinion that small and medium businesses may never have to actually report in that way. But there are a number of factors that are leading smaller businesses to have to report. And that's primarily due to larger corporates. And in your space, I can point to, you know, Maple Leaf Foods or some co-ops like Burn Bray or Ocean Spray that are doing this reporting on a voluntary basis. And so you'll find a lot of climate reports, ESG reports, sustainability reports that does a great overview of the environmental, social, and governance. But the main tie-in potentially to your business is with reporting on the Scope 3 emissions economy. So Lisa, if you don't mind moving to the next slide, I think it'd be important to give you a brief overview of how emissions are broken down and exactly how that ties your businesses into this reporting. And maybe you understand GHG emissions at a top level, but I'll just recap here just to make sure, to inform the conversation. But really, it's been broken down to 3 areas that makes it a lot easier to calculate and then manage as well. And so scope 1 emissions is really emissions that are generated from your own operation. So using RBC as an example, it's really, we work out of buildings, we're in finance, we don't really have a lot of labor or manual work. So we own a fleet of vehicles. Those vehicles emissions would roll up as our scope 1 emissions. On the farm, it would be, the emissions generated by running your equipment or running your vehicles. That will be scope 1. So it's really emissions that you have control over. Scope 2 emissions is tied to the energy that you purchase or utilize. And so for any of your electricity or your heating, any emissions that will be generated in producing that energy, that would roll up as your scope 2 emissions. That's definitely the one that's the easiest to calculate, because you could just look at your energy bill and there's some formulas that can derive that figure. Where it gets a lot more complex is scope 3. Scope 3 is really everything else. It's your upstream and downstream. And so if I look at a farm, you could be your purchasing of your equipment, the emissions that are generated from the manufacturing of that equipment, purchasing that equipment, and having it delivered to you. Or if you're selling your crops or your beef or your poultry, the emissions from the trucking, the emissions from the cooling, any of that down to when it's consumed would roll up as scope 3 emissions. So the interplay is really for your client. Let's say your client is Maple Leaf Foods, you're selling to Maple Leaf Foods. Their scope 3 emissions would be your scope 1 emissions. And so on a voluntary basis, a company like Maple Leaf is recording and reporting on scope 3 emissions. So they might go out, and I'm talking generally, they might go out and start asking questions to their suppliers and saying, hey, I need to understand your emissions because I'm reporting on those. And taking it to a next level, businesses like Maple Leaf have set emission reduction targets. So for example, they've set a scope 3 emissions reduction target by 30% by the year 2030. And so fundamentally, they are looking for ways to reduce that footprint. How they approach that, that's up to them. And it doesn't mean they're changing suppliers. Perhaps they're looking for ways to promote decarbonization in their supply chain. But I think there's a lot of wonderful opportunity with that. And so maybe I'll pass it back to you, Lorna, to give you a bit of time to talk about the opportunities with this growth and evolution of sustainability in the space.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Miguel. And so then that's where thinking about what's the impact to the farm. So like Miguel said, chances are at a farm level, not going to have to mandatory report on ESG. Although I do think having the strategy, I have found really helpful, knowing, hey, this is where we focus our donations and investments and stuff is good. But I don't think, even if you don't have to mandatory report it, knowing what Miguel just said, your suppliers and your customers may be asking for it and want to know. So I think there's 3 different impacts here. The first one is farms and ranches across Canada have a good story to tell. Each farm, like sustainable farming practices have been practiced for generations, and year after year, there's improvements being done. And being able to articulate that and know what that is can really go a long way in talking to the customer, whether it's a farm gate sale or a Maple Leaf. So I'm positive that that can go a long way as far as helping it. And another part with telling that story is that sustainability has to be profitable in order to, one of our favorite sayings here is, and I know that you probably heard it, is you can't go green if you're in the red. So a lot of the practices that have been implemented as sustainable are also good for both your soil and for your bottom line. The second one is, if you can even further than talk to your story, but being able to articulate it and provide those, document it, then I think there will be opportunities in the value chains that want to promote this as they're doing it. So premium paid potentially for that if you're documenting and being able to show it. And then the third one, as I learn more and more about the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and the more corporations are incorporating it in their reporting and everything, not only is it going to open markets for you, but potentially there could be markets that are limited if you can't do it. So that's where another reason where I think it's an interesting story of why it is good to be able to figure out, but would be the first to admit it's not easy to figure out. There's not one single agreed upon MRV, which is measurable results verification. So figuring this out isn't easy, but that's why I think, and even I came into my role here on a national level in November, and I've seen a big shift already as far as why we need to start thinking about this and talking about this even. So, so then when we think about, that's the reporting and the ESG on the farm level. The other part of it is some of the things you're implementing or doing need financing, obviously. So if you're implementing a biogas facility or switching to a variable rate plant or fertilizer application, there are financing options available, and that's where Miguel is the expert. So I'm going to pass it over to him.
Thanks, Lorna. Yeah, and this is really a way for us to be partners in the space. We want to take an active role in supporting, the energy transition and supporting the transition of your businesses to being more sustainable. And so, at least if you don't mind moving to the next slide, what I really want to do is give an overview of the relevant products for your space. So there's a number of products in the market, but I pulled out these two that I thought are the ones that we see most commonly and probably the ones that make the most sense potentially for your business. And so they fall into two different buckets. The first bucket is what we call use of proceeds based, where the loan is specifically supporting an eligible sustainable project, and the primary one we see is called a green loan, so supporting a green activity or project. And really what that is, it's the market kind of understanding and labeling the loan as saying that what you're undertaking is green. And there's no pricing discount with this. However, if you are working with a client that has a sustainability plan, this is a wonderful way for your business to stand out in the space. And the barrier of entry is relatively low. It could be just the purchasing of equipment. It could be undertaking certain processes. And although the use of funds is restricted to that activity, it requires a self-certification by your business. And so it's quite an easy process to achieve. Now, as RBC is looking to continue to promote this type of activity, we've actually launched a sustainable agriculture equipment policy, where we're willing to offer, case by case basis. We're looking to look at certain equipment that could qualify under this policy, where we might offer enhanced terms and conditions, better LTVs, longer amortization, interest-only periods, and that'll be financing specific regenerative or sustainable ag equipment. So as examples, maybe no-till compatible equipment, variable rate sprayers, or precision planting equipment. Those types of things might qualify. And so we want to, again, continue to promote sustainable practices, be partners with you. And so we're willing to offer better terms for this type of thing. The second bucket is what we call behavior-based lending for sustainable finance. The primary instrument we see is what's called a sustainability-linked loan. Now, I will say that this is much more for larger corporates or for businesses that are further down a sustainable strategy. And that's primarily due to the fact that because it does come with a pricing adjustment, there are much stringent restrictions in terms of the things that you need to do, which might have higher fees as well. And so what it is, it's tying in a financing to pre-established ESG KPIs and targets. So environmental, you can think like GHG emission reductions, perhaps water efficiency. You could see a social KPI like diversity and inclusion or health and safety. And we would work with the borrower as the sustainable loan coordinator to establish annual targets. They have to be ambitious, very ambitious and relevant. But if you achieve those targets, then you can get up to a 5 basis points reduction. Now, again, as mentioned, because there is a reduction, performance against those targets have to be third-party verified. And so oftentimes, from a financial point of view, that might get balanced out. And so fundamentally, we don't tell businesses to pursue a sustainable avenue to get this type of product. Essentially, if you're already going down that pathway, already going down and building out your own plan, lots of businesses are already auditing and doing reporting. And so in that case, something like this might make sense. And this is a way for us to give back and to continue to support you and your story down the line. But I mean, financing is one part of the solution. So maybe Lorna, maybe tell us a little bit more about what else RBC is doing in the space and how we're continuing to support our clients here.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Miguel. So we know that scope 1, 2, and 3 and knowing your carbon footprint isn't an easy task. My predecessor tried to do it on her farm 2 or 3 times, took a couple hours each time and gave up on Holos just because it was hard to come up with what that number is. So we feel the pain of trying, like, we know why it's important, but trying to actually get it there, we understand. So that's where we thought, how can we help and how can we kind of walk alongside and learn with our customers. So as like we have a lot of data, we have some amazing IT designers. So what we have done for our clients is develop what's called the RBC Client Explorer Agriculture. And what it does is it takes agronomic data as well as satellite data based on address and some sales data and pulls that together. We're just in phase 1 right now, so it's only available for some select crop clients in Manitoba, but we're building it out, and that it just verifies that information, and then it gives you 3 steps. The first one is what the greenhouse gas footprint is with no sustainable agronomic practices. The surprise of no one. Step 2 is the practices that are implemented, and every farm across the country implements some, whether it's crop rotations or no-till and variable rate. So step 2 shows what your greenhouse gas is currently with the practices you're doing. And then step 3 has some economic models on if you tried some of these other ones. It's not every one is applicable because not everybody's land is not the same, not everybody's farm's the same. Things don't always work out, but that's where it's to work alongside and see what some of the options are and where, okay, the economics work. Now we should maybe go investigate a little further. So it has those 3 steps, and just our relationship team is working alongside that learning process because it is all new. But many of them are farmers themselves, so know what those practices are. So it allows you to tell the story and have some data to help with that. It's not, again, telling people how to farm. So, but beyond that, at that client level and what we have there, the other big piece I'd say Royal Bank's taken action on is where we feel we can help with that research and that advocacy. And so with that develops the Climate Action Institute. And so then that's where Lisa comes in as our ag policy analyst for the Institute. So I'm going to pass it over to her to share kind of what they're doing there.
Great, thanks, Lorna. Just answering some questions in the chat, and of course, very happy to follow up if there's any further questions as well. But Lorna was discussing at the client level, so now going to move to more of the enterprise level to describe what RBC is doing at large to support agriculture as it navigates kind of the changing landscape and climate. So I have been with RBC's Climate Action Institute for the last 3 months or so, and have found it to be a very unique place. It's very collaborative and very engaged with stakeholders. And it's a group of economists, policy analysts, researchers like myself, and we're all working collaboratively to explore and identify ways to really progress Canada on climate action. So initially, our group is focused on 3 main sectors, which is buildings and real estate, agriculture, and energy systems. Our focus on these 3 sectors has a 3-part mandate. The first is to inform and inspire. The second is to engage decision makers. And the third is to facilitate bold action. So under the first and second pillar of our mandate, RBC's Climate Action Institute produces a number of thought leadership pieces, whether it be reports, blogs, we host roundtables and discussions, all really to create a space to have challenging conversations of what Canada's future can look like as we transition to a low carbon economy and really enable our economies and sectors like agriculture to thrive. So a few key examples of our agriculture thought leadership work is the first is the Next Green Revolution, which was published in 2023. And it was a series of a number of reports focused on greenhouse gas emissions and climate policy and markets, skills and training needed to really enable the Canadian sector to thrive over the next few decades and then be a global leader. And lastly, identifying existing technologies that are already applied on farms that are making a significant impact in climate, as well as those that are emerging that show promise. A report that we recently released was on the greenhouse sector. I had the opportunity to lead this research, and it was really interesting to see and learn about the impressive growth that the veg and fruit greenhouse sector has experienced over the last decade. It's quite remarkable. And then also kind of what does the next decade look like for them in terms of the key challenges that they face in terms of infrastructure around energy, water, and waste management, and kind of what some suggestions may look like to help them succeed. Up next, we have a really exciting project coming down the pipeline. We are looking at agricultural growth, particularly agri-food and agricultural exports, and what is that potential for Canada over the next decade to move from being 5th or 4th globally to being potentially 1st or 2nd. What are the key things that we need to do to enable that to happen, as well as kind of learning from the history and what successes we have had and shortcomings and what we need to do to continue to move forward with the sector. Under the third pillar, so facilitating bold action at RBC's Climate Action Institute, we are very actively engaging with stakeholders and different initiatives to really work towards and enable climate action in agriculture. That at first and foremost, kind of to what Lorna was mentioning, that produce real outcomes, but are also cost effective and create real incentives for farmers. So that's really important. That note on you can't go green if you're in red. We really want to ensure that whatever kind of ideas are being considered, it aligns with that thinking as well. So part of that work in terms of facilitating bold action is that RBC is a founding member of CANZA, or the Canadian Alliance for Net Zero Agri-Food. And this is a relatively new initiative, and it's pre-competitive with a number of other large companies and universities, including Maple Leaf Foods, Nutrien, and a few others, and really working together initially on 2 initiatives. And the first one is the Climate Smart Farming Initiative, and the second is the National Biodigesters Initiative. So to go through the first one, the Climate Smart Farming Initiative, this is really focused on advancing measuring, reporting, and verification of soil carbon. I'm sure many of you know that is really the backbone to advance market opportunities such as carbon insets, offsets, green premiums, and so on. So advancing our measurement approaches and improving that measuring, reporting, and infrastructure, and making sense of the ecosystem of tools that are available to farmers is a key are key activities that CANSA is working on, while also ensuring that business model continuously becomes more stronger and makes sense to on the ground. So under the Climate Smart Farming Initiative, we are initially starting with a pilot in Saskatchewan with a large grains and oilseeds farm, and working with the University of Guelph and the University of Saskatchewan to really improve those measurement approaches. The measurement approaches, we're ensuring that they, as they advance, they become more accessible, reduce the costs, and really try to improve the accuracy in balancing those elements out. The measurement approaches that are being taken, we're ensuring that they are aligning with international standards, so that whatever is produced in Canada, we ensure that if it ever came to this point, they align with carbon offset opportunities as well. We are initially focused with the Climate Smart Farming Initiative in Saskatchewan and expanding in the prairies, but ideally we will start to expand across Canada as well. So the second initiative is the National Biodigesters Initiative. The National Biodigesters Initiative is a really exciting one, and like I mentioned, it's complementary to the Climate Smart Soils Initiative. And what we have found, and what CANSA has found, is that biodigesters have really scaled up in Europe and the US, but not as much in Canada. But that doesn't mean that there's lots of potential to do so. So CANSA has done some initial analysis and found that more than 70% of the manure in Canada is within a concentrated region that could potentially feed into large hub and spoke models, while the remaining amount is relatively smaller, but still quite substantial, but more suitable for smaller or multi-farm biodigester models. And at the moment, the National Biodigesters Initiative is really focused on education and awareness, recognizing that there are some key challenges and barriers that farmers face in kind of the application, implementation, and operationalizing phases, and just wanting to ensure that the existing knowledge and the existing stakeholders are aligned and compiling and advancing knowledge together. So that work is being done under 4 main pillars. The first is to reinforce that advocacy effort. So again, aligning existing knowledge and bringing everyone together to have that coherent story. The second is to host farmer support centers, so disseminating that knowledge that we collect. One example is looking at regional spotlights to demonstrate farmers within local communities that have gone through the process of investing in a biodigester, and sharing that story with others so that knowledge becomes a little bit more open access. The third is to advance value opportunities. So recognizing that there are existing opportunities to receive incentives and so on through biodigester projects, ensuring that the pathways to those incentives are extremely clear and accessible to farmers. And then lastly, coordinate tech implementation and support. So facilitating technology optimization efforts to really improve industry profitability. So thank you very much for your attention. That's all from us for now. We're really happy to answer any of your questions. And if you would like to follow up with any of us, here's our contact information.
Thanks, Lisa. I see 2. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
No, I was just going to say thank you, Lisa. And yeah, that this is why I brought some friends, that some of the questions in the chat, Miguel is going to answer.
Yeah, I saw the questions in the chat. I was eager to answer them. Sorry to cut you off. The first one, I see Glenn's question around, do you see a point in the future where the regulator OSFI will say you couldn't make a loan to a farmer if the farmer didn't meet scope 1, 2, or 3? we don't have a viewpoint. We don't see what OSFI is going to do. We don't think that at all. The focus right now in the sustainability space is the opportunities. And so for us, agriculture is one of our key pillars. We've targeted some of the higher emitting sectors as the areas we want to be very active in and support. And so we're here to be partners. We're not looking to restrict capital. That's not the future plan. It's really about how can we support, obviously being an active partner to decarbonize, but where we haven't heard anything down the pipeline around restricting capital in the space. So hopefully that answers your question, Glenn. Happy to answer a follow-up if you have any. Second question from Warren I saw. So does Bill 59 greenwashing bill affect our ability to tell our story of sustainability? This is a really good question. This is really new to us as well. So this is something we're reviewing. So we don't have an opinion at this point, but we're taking a look at this to understand how it impacts us as well, because we're very vocal about our sustainability story. So, maybe this will be something we can talk about in the future. But yeah, we unfortunately don't have an opinion right now.
Bill, I see a hand
Oh, I
up.
see.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Colin, sorry, I passed it off to Colin. He was gonna watch the chat here and the screen to see if questions. I think all the other questions were answered except for I do see one hand, Bill Campbell, if you have a question.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. Lots of information within there. But I believe that the conversation about enhanced sustainability is larger consumer and producer or processor driven. And I'm curious as to, is there any template or document that has been utilized by RBC or other said organizations that really highlights what agriculture is doing and what policies they follow? An example would be through CFIA, Health Canada, PMRA, CRSB, food, provincial and federal regulations, and the story of how 4R nutrient management, zero till, and how the enhanced production that we see in Western Canada has helped provide food for the grocery store shelves. I think that we are missing the good story that we are already doing. And if we don't notice or acknowledge where we are as stewards of the land, that it will be more difficult for producers to engage in the type of document that you have prepared. And I know that there is more steps to be taken, but I think we need to work hand in hand, and we need to include the good parts that agriculture does to provide a very nutritious, safe food for consumers.
Thanks, Bill, for the question. If Lorna, you want it, certainly all your voice as far as what all the good work agriculture is doing. If you just maybe want to comment on, I think the segregated, like how you would use this information if you have it segregated so that you would be able to use that to I guess influence or update stakeholders in the industry, particularly consumers, as to the good work agriculture is doing.
Yeah, I think for sure that what I've really liked with Lisa's group and the Climate Action Institute is that John Stackhouse and Dave McKay are in different circles than you and me and like all of agriculture. So, and I do think, to your point, was we need to get the story out to further than the agriculture community. And so then that's where we definitely, that's part of our strategy is to get it out to the public, but also to the policy people and working alongside. So that's where John and Dave with Lisa's consultation and Lisa as well is getting there. So yeah, and this is, so the information we have, it depends on where you're talking is like that individual client tool is your individual farm story. But then the research Lisa's doing is the greater agriculture story, which we're really trying to get out there as well. So.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Lorna. Are there any other questions? Lots of information there to delve into, and certainly we have your contact information if anyone wants to go offline to ask specific questions. But I think in the greater aspect, I think this was definitely first and foremost the big topic that we did discuss at the FPT meetings was data-driven information, and certainly having tools that farmers like ourselves, producers, can access through organizations and businesses, financiers like yourself, certainly give us additional tools. And I know across the board, even provincial associations, there was a presenter from PEI on farmer tools. And I think if we all work together and have that information right from the farm, you know, if it's shared, you know, regionally, then we certainly have that information to provide consumers of the good things that we're doing to get to that other audience. Thank you very much. Again, I'm just looking screen here, Colin. I don't know if we have any other questions that haven't been answered in the chat. For sure, we will pass those on to Lorna and your team to get them answered. So thank you very much again. And we will push on to here into our next presenter on capital gains tax change. We do have Shawn Friesen from BDO Canada LLP on the line, and we have your slides up there. So I will pass it on to Shawn. Welcome, Shawn.
Right on. Thanks for having me. So very happy to be here. It's I can talk tax for a long time. So you know, if there's a virtual big old hook that you need to drag me out of, feel free to do so. Give me some cues or something, because I can probably just keep talking and talking. Killed some time, and we're here. So I'll start in here. If you want, you can go to the next slide, Colin. The next slide, we just did a webinar right after the budget came out by our BDO National Office, so it is there. If you guys do want to watch, it should be publicly available to whoever wants to join. You can go to the next slide, Colin. So our key updates in the federal budget, there were a number, but for our purposes, the three big ones were around capital gains. And of note, of course, they were so significant that when the budget was introduced, that portion of the budget was set aside and is being voted on separately. The rest of the budget was voted on and passed, and the capital gains portion is being voted on separately. The three big things are the change to the inclusion rate, and most people have heard about that by now. The increase to the capital gains exemption happened as well, from about $1 million to $1.25 million. And then there's this new Canadian Entrepreneurs Initiative that was announced. That's not in effect yet and won't be for about another 10 years. And we don't really have a ton of information on it, and we're going to have to see what it really means. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. You can go to the next slide, Colin. So the big news is for capital gains realized after June 24th. They gave us 10 weeks from the budget date to get any affairs in order if we wanted to. The taxes are going up. It's pretty simple for corporations, which a majority, I would say, of our producers are now in, especially if you're buying any sort of capital assets and you needing to finance them. It's really hard to do that at a personal level. So most producers are incorporated, and the news is that once you sell something now, the dates have been passed, there will be more taxes to pay, absent any other planning that is available at the corporate level or savings. It is going up from a half inclusion rate to 66 2/3, so or 2/3 inclusion rate. It means about 8.5% increase in taxes. Individuals are a little bit different. They have a little bit of a buffer before that rate applies. So if you have $250,000 of gains now that are taxable, not eligible for capital gains exemption, they will still be taxed at the old rate and not at the new rate. Once you go over 250,000, it will be at the new inclusion rate. So You know, if you have an asset with $500,000 of gains and it's in both of yours and your spouse's names, you'll still be paying tax at the old rate, if you will. Okay. You can go to the next slide, Colin. So here's just the numbers themselves for individuals. It shows the tax rate that was applicable before June 25th, or for the amount of income that's 250,000 or less in the new regime, versus the new tax rate at the new inclusion rate. So for Manitoba, we're going from a higher. This is the highest marginal tax rate for an individual. Is at 25.2% versus 33.6. So going up about 8.5. If you go to the next slide, I'll show the corporate rates. And again, there's no buffer for this, so it's straight increase of about 8.5% again that we will pay corporately. So in my world, we are concerned with this concept called integration, which basically means if you're running your business through a corporation versus personally, you should pay the same amount of tax in the end, absent the deferral mechanism. So what a corporation does for you is it defers the tax, because you earn a dollar into income. In Manitoba, you're going to pay 9% tax if you're a small business corporation. So you've got 91 cents left on that dollar after your tax bill. And then if you were to take that out as a dividend, top rate, you pay about 47%. You're left with roughly 50 cents left on the dollar if you were to flow that all the way through, and if you were at the highest tax bracket. It doesn't work. It's a theory. The integration doesn't fully work, but it was close. But now it's going to be even further out, that like if you're running a capital gain through your corporation versus personally, and especially at that old rates that you got personally, it's going to be way out. You're going to be paying a lot more tax running that capital gain through your corporation than you will if you had incurred that capital gain personally. You might not be able to control that, of course. It's just the function of what it is. But knowing that you are paying more tax. It used to be that I could run a capital gain through a corporation. Your effective tax rate at the top rate would be about 28%. So about a 3% loss on working it through. If you were to take that full dollar out, now it's going to be about 38%. So it's going to be more like a 10% gap in our integration rates. So anyways, it bugs people like me. Not that I don't think anybody really cares. You can go to the next slide, Colin. So a lot of the discussion we had when the budget came out was like, holy cow, what are we going to do? We got to do some planning here. And we actually had to go step back and go, okay, what does this actually mean for some of our clients that have already filed tax returns? Because we might have had some people that had taken what we call a capital gains reserve. Say they sold something in the last 5 years and they're stretching the payment terms out. Well, with these 2024 rate increases, is a 2024 recognition of a capital gain going to be in the new rates? And we found out no, it doesn't. But nonetheless, that just shows that we had to scramble a little bit at that time because we weren't sure. Sorry, no, keep on the other side there, slide there, Colin. Perfect. But some people did trigger some gains, and a lot of discussions. I think in lots of the cases, the discussions ended up don't trigger the gains because we're not thinking about selling in the next number of years. So why outlay that cash to the government now when you could put that back into your business and let it work for you, and you'll end up with more at the back end to cover even the extra taxes. So a lot of discussions were like that, but we also had a lot of clients that were, hey, I'm selling next year or later this year and I need to do something. So we would do some planning. But nonetheless, we had to look at, okay, what's our return on investment? If say you had a stock and you had a capital gain there, and you wanted to trigger the gain and save some tax, but you're going to keep that stock for the next 10 years, it probably made sense to keep it. So that's that note on return on investment. Prior to June 25th as well, if you had sold some land or assets corporately, you had to worry about what we call a passive income grind. So I had mentioned that you paid tax at 9% in Manitoba on active income. There were rules brought in a few years ago that said if you had what we call passive income, which capital gains can be considered, that it could grind that 9% where instead you're paying 27%. So some people might have sold something and thinking that they're saving 8.5, but then all of a sudden, oh, we might have lost our 9% bracket and we're paying 18% more tax on our active income. So hopefully that didn't happen to anybody. They did change what we call the general anti-avoidance rules earlier this year as well. So any transactions that we did for planning, we had to first of all say, are we into these anti-avoidance rules and could they come after us as a result of that? We seem to be okay on that. And another rule change they made was this alternative minimum tax. So AMT is something that's the bane of many accountants, I would say, and especially where in the past we had capital gains exemption being claimed on a sale of land, for instance. This minimum tax could apply, and it's not a small number and what should be an otherwise tax-free capital gain. And some people could afford, some people might be able to get it back. It's a prepayment of tax. Yeah, the government looks at your taxes and go, well, your total income is this, but you're only paying taxes of this, so we think you should pay this minimum tax. You can get back over 7 years, but you have to have income tax and income to pay that tax on. So you might have had situations where a little old man in his 90s sells land, he's only got pension income, has this minimum tax bill for 60 grand and can never get it back. That was typically a lot of the stuff that would happen, and you'd have to explain that yes, it's a tax-free gain, but the government's got this other mechanism that makes you pay the tax, and in this case we probably can't get it back. They did change those rules at the beginning of the year, so actually for people that were triggering those gains prior to June 25th, our minimum tax might even be higher than 60 grand. I did a transaction before June 25th, and the minimum tax bill was 140 grand on that transaction. That's the most AMT I've ever seen because of that rule change. I will say that that minimum tax, because it is refundable, it was still a better result for that individual than selling at the new rates. Okay, but still had to be factored in, and a lot of the rules are complex and not easily understandable, so a lot of scrambling had to happen. You can go to the next slide now, Colin. So what if you're doing after June 25th? What are some things we have to consider here now? So first of all, are we doing it personally or corporately? If it's a corporate gain, you're going to pay a higher rate of tax, 8.5% more, but you're not getting out as much tax-free money. So prior to June 25th, if you had a $100 gain in a corporation, you'd pay tax at about 25%. On the gain, some of that tax you'd get back eventually. It's kind of a complicated thing, but there'd also be a pool of half of the gain in this tax-free capital dividend account. So out of that $100, $50, as long as you follow the right elections and resolutions with the lawyers, you can pay out this tax-free dividend to yourself, and you get $50 tax-free in your pocket. Now that tax-free dividend is only going to be $33 because that's the non-taxable portion. So if there's a way that you can instead trigger that gain to be at a personal level, that would be a better result, especially if you got capital gains exemption. But even at that old buffer of 25.2%, where you're at that 250,000, maybe there's some other planning where instead of triggering a corporate sale, it might mean we slip that corporate asset over to another corporation and effect a share sale if we can at all possible. Reserves are also a possibility, not so importantly corporately, but personally. Say you sell something for $1.5 million and you don't want to pay tax at that 33.6% rate. You can stretch the terms out over 5 years. You'll pay a little bit of the 33.6, maybe in that case, right? Maybe I should have used the $1.25 million example. In that case, you would bring 250,000 in every year and always be at the old rate. That is an option available to you. I do tell clients though, take your money and run, to be honest with you, and invest it that way. But if it is something that makes sense and you want to wait, that is an option. Same kind of thing for estate taxation. So when you die, you're deemed to sell everything at fair market value to your estate. The exceptions are if you have a surviving spouse or if you have farm property that's eligible for the rollover. So the rollover is a rule, intergenerational rollover allows you to transfer at anywhere between cost and fair market value, land, shares of a family farm corporation, those sorts of things, to a Canadian resident child. And why that's important is, say you've got a corporation with $20 million of land inside of it. Odds are, maybe there's a son or daughter that's involved in the farm, and that's where the farm succession is going to go. If this was another business, a non-farm or fisher business, say it's a grocery store with $20 million, to transfer to the next generation, it's a fair market value disposition. With farms, it's not. We can elect to not. We can just say, oh, we can gift it over at cost and get nothing for it if we wanted to. But that rule is in place to allow for the farms to continue, right? But being offside of that rollover rule means a fair market value transaction. So being on side for that rollover is going to be hugely important. Capital gains is nice, right? But it's only $1 million on that 20. So that shows how important that rollover rule is. So if you're not currently qualifying for that rollover rule, we've got to make sure you get on side for that rollover rule as a producer. If it's possible as well, and you've got other non-farm estate or assets in your estate, look at other ways of distributing them, maybe stretching out the proceeds over time, or somehow dealing with those assets before, if you know when that time is going to happen, of course. Another thing to consider too is that gains are going to be taxed higher in a corporate setting, and so it's probably even more important to get that asset out to the personal name and grow it there instead. If you start generating too much cash, really should try to migrate that cash out to your personal name and invest it there for tax rates too, not only just for capital gains rates, but for personal versus corporate investment tax rates. Your investment tax rate in a corporation is 50% on the first dollar. Higher, you're going to pay a higher rate on the first dollar than you ever will personally on, say, interest income. So another reason to move stuff out of the corp if you can. Can you actually even execute a share sale? My one example said maybe we move assets around and to another corporation and we can sell the shares. Is that even feasible? You might have other assets inside of your corporation that you have to move out, and there's certain rules that can work to make the tax benefit of that share sale make it go away, because if you have to move assets out to another corporation prior to a sale, that can create taxes on its own. So it might not even be able to sell shares at all. And then finally, the one thing I want to mention too, the big deferral mechanism that's been around for a long time and it's still around, and it's going to be probably even more important now that capital gains rates are higher and not as attractive to flow through, is the replacement property elections that are available. If you sell a piece of land and you don't want to pay the tax, but also you're going to buy another piece of land to replace it, you can elect to defer the gain on that first piece of land that you sold to when you sell the second piece. So it's the second piece now has a lower cost base because you've deferred that gain. So that's going to be an important thing to always keep in mind. You can go to the next slide now, Colin. So that's the rate inclusion changes. They also increased the capital gains exemption, so it's gone up to $1.25 million. It was actually at $1,016,000 at the beginning of this year because it was starting to be indexed, so it's not a full $250,000 increase, but regardless, splitting hairs at that point in time. This is only for dispositions after June 24th, and they are going to increase the exemption room after 2025. So starting in 2026, they'll start being indexed by some sort of inflationary adjustment. One thing I should note with the inclusion rate for capital gains exemption, even though it's still a tax-free gain, we will see more impact on, say, seniors and other people getting income tested benefits. So seniors, citizens, for instance, get old age security, and if you start making more money over a certain threshold, they'll start clawing it back until you hit a cap, and then they ask for it all back. And so with the inclusion rate changes, you're going to have a higher amount showing up in your income to claw back your old age security. So say your old age security clawback threshold is $100,000. The old rules on $100,000 capital gain, you only had $50,000 showing up. Now you'll have 66. So you're more likely that you're going to have to pay some old age security back. So there's definitely going to be more taxes. You can go to the next slide, Colin. So I mentioned lifetime capital gains exemption, sale of land, shares of family farm corporation, interest in family farm partnership, quota if you hold it personally, those things qualify for the exemption. There's tests on holding period. Those are usually easily met. It's a 2-year holding period test. That's pretty easy. It's a usage test. That's a little tricky. You have to be involved in an active business and use it mostly in a farm business. And when we're talking about a corporate setting, 90% of the assets have to be farm assets. Not farm assets, active assets for the capital gains exemption. For the rollover, it has to be 90% farm assets. So there's an important distinction. If you've got a farm and you're starting to spread out different businesses, say you start a trucking operation inside your farm, that's a non-farm asset, it's still okay for capital gains exemption, but it's not good for the rollover. So it's going to be important to look at those sorts of things. You can go to the next slide, Colin. Okay, let's talk about this new thing, the CEI. This is a new tax incentive. It's only on share sales, so it's being touted as an extra way to save tax for those people that can sell shares of their business. It's in addition to your lifetime capital gains exemption. You have to meet the right qualifications. It's up to $2 million of a new exemption, if you will, but that won't be fully in place until 2034. They're only adding $200,000 to this notional account starting in 2025, and then it will get to the full 2 million by 2034. So if you have a share sale and you're hoping to use this in say 2030, you won't have the full 2 million yet. You'd only have a portion of it, right? 1.4 or 6 or whatever it is. The rate applied on that is 1/2 of whatever the prevailing inclusion rate is at the time. So today the inclusion rate is 2/3. I can do this math. 1/2 of that is 1/3. So basically, if you were able to use this CEI and you had your full 2 million, you'd pay 1/3 inclusion rate on $2 million of proceeds. Effective tax rate in Manitoba is going to be around 17% then, right? So 33% down to 17, 16.5, whatever. You can go to the next slide. So there's some parameters for this, and this is kind of pie in the sky. I don't even know if this will be applicable to farmers, to be honest with you. I think there's going to be some things that'll shoot a hole in it the way the wording is right now. I do think I think they're going to have to look at this a little bit closer and get us a little bit more meat and see if this is actually applicable to farmers or not. It was touted as a way for manufacturing technology sectors. Doesn't seem like farms are excluded, but when I read some of these qualifying conditions, it makes me wonder if we will actually be excluded. So I'll go through them. At the time of sale, must be small business corporation shares owned directly by the person selling. That's usually not a problem. We've got a farm that's incorporated. It'll qualify as that. Throughout immediately preceding 24-month period, it was a Canadian-controlled private corporation, and more than half of the assets were principally used in an active business. That's usually not a problem as well if we're talking about selling shares of an active business. This one could come back. Claimant was a founding investor at time corporation was initially capitalized and held for at least 5 years. I think this will be a big thing that will knock a lot of farms off because a lot of farms are not first generation anymore. Further, we've got farms that maybe were started in the 70s. I think it could be third or fourth generations or even earlier than that. Further, when we have new legislation out, relatively new legislation for C208 transactions where parents can now sell shares of their farming company to a corporation owned by their child and claim capital gains exemption. We couldn't do that in the past. But if you have to be a founding investor, what is the incentive for the child coming in? Other than, they like their parents, they want the farm to continue and all that fun stuff too. But they're technically, potentially put themselves at odds with being a founding investor to claim for their own self-interest later on. At all times, I'll move on to the next one. All times claimant directly owned more than 10% fair market value in votes. Maybe could be okay, but going back to my comment on founding investor, if their dad or mom was in there before, maybe that throws us offside. Actively engaged throughout 5-year period, the seller must be actively engaged. That should be no problem. There are exclusions. I'll get into those in the next slide. And finally, the shares must have been obtained for fair market value. That could be a problem, right? If we have a $20 million farm and we're transitioning to the next generation, we're probably not paying $20 million for it because we don't want to pay that much tax. Just would handicap the farm and you'd have to sell the assets, and then you're into a vicious cycle of a big restructure, right? So I think when we look at those, there's usually when we have a transition of shares, it's usually done in a combination of a sale or share dividends and a gift. And usually there's a gift involved from parents to the children. So they wouldn't have obtained them for fair market value in that case. Next slide, Colin. So it's easier to say which ones are not available to claim this. So professional corporations, lawyers, accountants, doctors, any corporation where it relies on the reputation or skill of employees. So to me, that means anywhere where the goodwill is inherently inside of an individual, plumbers, for instance, electricians, trades. those sorts of things. Financial insurance industry, real estate industry, food and accommodation. To me, that means hospitality industry. To me, I don't think food would be farming. Food and accommodation seems to be in a hospitality term. And then you can see the rest listed there as well. So to me, farms are not excluded, but I'm not convinced that we'll actually get it. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this are my comments from before. Are we actually a founding investor? It's a competing factor when we have a C2A transaction that benefits the parents. Fair market value transactions probably not happening. And do we have a problem with our industry? Don't know. I think we need some more information. You can go to the next slide, Colin. Okay, so just to wrap things up, I was asked, do these new rules benefit or disadvantage farming operations? And I think the answer is clear today. It's not good. It's not better. I have been told, and from all the literature you see that, if you take advantage of the capital gains exemption and the CEI, you can sell for $4.5 million and you should be in the same position as you were beforehand. And to me, I go, well, yeah, that's all well and good if that's a perfect scenario, but that's assuming a lot. It's assuming that your sale is happening in 2034 or later, that you can use the full CEI. It's assuming that you qualify for the CEI. It's assuming that you can even effect a share sale, period. You might not be able to even do a share sale in a feasible manner, depending on what your corporate structure's like and who you're selling to. So planning is going to be even more important. Getting your corporation set up for the future, even if that sale doesn't happen for 10 years. If you do any sort of restructuring too close to the date, it could really cost you. So making sure you're on side, making sure you're qualifying, going to be more important than ever. That rollover rule is going to be huge. So going back to the question, I do think it's worse now. You're paying more corporate taxes now, guaranteed on a gain. There's just no doubt about it. I don't think these new rules will impact us terribly much. For the people that are using C2A transactions and just selling for capital gains exemption, then it's for sure better because we got an extra $250,000 that we can now put into people's pockets. But if you're wanting to sell for more than that to a third party, you're going to pay more taxes than you did before, in my mind. So anyways, I could keep going, I'm sure. But I'll open it up for anybody if they got any questions that I might be able to answer.
We had a question from Mike initially. If he wants to go ahead and unmute from the beekeepers.
Hey,
Yeah.
Mike.
Hey, Shawn, we're just myself are involved in family transition with the rollover.
Nice.
So you're saying, so I'm just thinking in the future too. So we're gonna basically, the parents will be gifting it to us. But then if for the sale of the shares, because we don't know what the next generation brings, would reincorporating after we gain position from the rollover, make a new corporation where we would then become the founding members work for future? Or
Maybe.
not?
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? Because like if you're getting the corporate, then you're starting up a new one. I'm thinking you're going to roll assets over and do a bunch of transactions to get there. You'd want to make sure that first of all, like I'd like more information before I tell people, let's do all this planning for the CEI that you may or may not ever be able to utilize, right? So to me, I would wait. I would wait a little bit before we do any restructure. Like continue on with your succession plan, utilize the rollover. The assets are in a corporation. The assets have value. It's important to transition that value in a tax effective manner. The next step, if we want to look at getting on side for CEI, I would wait for more information on CEI because I'm not convinced that it's going to be, as meaty as it is. I do think with more pushback from organizations like this and others, that they'll get us more information or get us more better terms, maybe carve outs from some of the things too. Because to me, to do all that work just to qualify for it seems, but that being said, we do all kinds of stuff like that all the time too, right?
Right.
So I would wait myself, Mike.
Okay, and then so another thing, you are suggesting that as an industry, we should be pushing back on this pretty heavily then.
I would, yeah, because a lot of the verbiage, a lot of the things I'm hearing is that, oh, people are going to be better off. You're going to be break even because you're still going to get more. But the way I read things, I just don't know if that's realistic or not. I'd like to have more information about that. And especially about how it, like in my example where it puts it at loggerheads with C208. If you're trying to sell to the next generation, they're not going to ever qualify for CEI. So.
And then one more, sorry. So is there a possibility to do a sale up to the capital gains limit and then roll over the rest?
Yep.
Okay. So
100%.
then our parents could get something.
And I would suggest you look at that, because in that way the budget is better for them, because now they have an extra $250,000 each that you can take out of the corporation. So like when you look at how you take money out of a corporation, you're pretty well stuck with dividends now, or a wage. Some firm, like we used to do what called capital gain strips. You can't do those anymore. That was a way to take money out and pay capital gains rates. They've shut that down. So essentially you're stuck with dividends, 47%, wages 50%, top rates. This C208, if you're selling for capital gains exemption, you're taking money out at 0% rates effectively. And that's the only way it can do it now, or one of the few ways it can do it now. So
right.
I would encourage you, if that's what your parents are thinking and they don't have any other capital gains exemption to use it on anywhere else, well, I think it's a smart move. And it could benefit you guys if they never take the cash out, and then at some point you retire or your kids don't want to take over. You've still got a pipeline. You can take a little bit of cash out and avoid that tax.
Great, thank you.
Probably more words than you wanted, Mike.
I have a question. I don't know. Is anyone else going to go?
I think I saw Butch's hand up, but maybe we'll just so you know.
Oh, sorry.
I was quite concerned about this. I phoned my accountant twice and he said, passing land onto your children, this will have zero effect on the way the rules were. And
yeah.
That's, I read the Western Producer article and made you kind of pretty scared. And then I phoned twice, he says, no, it has zero effect, nothing.
Yeah, there's no effect on the gift.
I can see it from a government's point of view, the billions of dollars they're going to collect from people that can afford it, and even the provinces. Now it said 10 billion per now is that per province or per is that the total? But that's a lot of money.
Yeah,
they're always looking for money, and we all want things. So I don't know if I can get too excited about this.
yeah. I mean, you in the budgetary figures they were expecting a big revenue bump here for capital gains triggered between April 16th and June 24th. So they are anticipating a lot of people paying some tax. I don't think it's going to work out like they think it is. But you're right, the rollover rules have not changed. I want to just stress, make sure you're on side for those, because they are separate rules from capital gains exemption. And sometimes people think they qualify and they don't. So when you look and the rollover rules, you got to look at the totality of years farmed in the family. And you have to have it farmed for more years than rented is essentially the rules. And that could be easy for many and that could be hard for others. So
thank you.
You betcha. Thank you. I have been asked if the rules would ever be reversed in successive governments or anything like that. I can't really speak to that. My experience with that is it typically doesn't happen. Rules pretty well. I had to guess, I'd say no.
Okay, I think we had just one last question here. Scott, you had a question.
Yeah, I did. And apparently I'm not smart enough to figure out how to put my hand up on the on Zoom. So, but if I'm understanding correctly, I just want you, if you were to confirm this, it seems like this change would really benefit, like obviously the larger complete exemption is going to benefit smaller farms, right? So
yeah,
like it will clearly disadvantage like very, very large corporate farms, right? But again, question, I guess, would it also disincentivize like foreign and non-farming land ownership?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, foreign owners, they don't get that $250,000 buffer. They're going to pay tax at the new rates, period. So they it's straight up.
It's basically it's going to disincentivize non-farming ownership of land. Am I accurate there?
I don't know, right? Because when they buy in, they're buying in it's the long-term game, right? So maybe if the rate of return is still going to be estimated to be better than the taxes, could be. But in theory, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, so it could potentially like suppress land values slightly, right? If you got less potential bidders, theoretically, I suppose.
Okay. Yep,
which,
that's fair.
all right. So yeah, I'm kind of going on the angle that I'm thinking like, okay, land values are kind of prohibitive for younger, smaller farmers, and anything that's going to suppress land values is actually going to benefit a good number of our members as well, right? So
That's a good point. Yep, that's a good point.
not just, yeah, high land prices are not just, it's not good for farmers necessarily, especially if you've got non-farming land ownership.
Yep.
Long-term
And we're
thing,
seeing
so-
more of that for sure, right? Like there's just
Right.
more non-farmers are getting land, or at least consideration is being tossed around for that. And yeah, they will,
Yeah.
if they fall offside, which they shouldn't, but at some point somebody might fall off of the rollover, the capital gains exemption, then it's going to be paying more tax at that point.
And then I have one more question that's not related to the changes at all, but it's just something that's kind of come up because of the changes. When do like organizations like say Hutterite colonies, when do capital gains get triggered for those organizations?
When they ever sell.
So basically when one person dies on the colony, do they have to sell the shares in a corporation to the next person, and that triggers like does the
No,
physical mortality of any one person
no,
trigger capital?
my understanding of those structures are their trusts, and so they're all beneficiaries of the structure, and so an individual's death would not, in my knowledge, but I don't do Hutterite colonies. I'll be honest with you. So.
Okay, so yeah, that's very interesting. So basically, everybody but Hutterite colonies ends up paying capital gains at least once a generation.
My experience with colonies is the land gets in there and it doesn't really come out, right? But the same logic can happen in a corporate setting, right? If a farm buys land and dad and we have successive generations taking it over and everybody's farming, you can still keep gifting the shares down the line, right? So you might not pay tax on a piece of land, or even if it's outside the corporation, you might not pay tax on that piece of land ever if it
Right.
keeps going down the line. So
Interesting.
Thanks.
Okay.
yeah,
For that.
yeah.
One last question, Glenn Young.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Shawn. That's excellent presentation. A lot of really, really good information, and especially thank you for your discussion on AMT. I think a lot of us don't understand that the way we should. Anyway, my question, you had mentioned rollovers, and I wanted to make sure that I heard you right. You said that a rollover is not allowed to a child if that child is not resident in Canada. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. And we're seeing that more often now too. You got some kids that might have moved down south or abroad, and they're not coming back, right? So that's a big carve out, right? If we don't have that kid now, we got to think about other ways to transition estate value and to help that child at the same time.
Yeah, I think we're all going to need a good lawyer too.
Yep. Nothing happens without good lawyers. So
Actually, if I could add on that, so I have a sibling in the States, and we're rolling over to us currently, but in the future, he would like to move home and help out on the farm.
Right.
So is there anything stopping me if I'm full rollover, then transferring some shares to my brother because
Yep.
he's a sibling, or
That's
not?
right. The rollover only works between parents and children. So if you're, hey brother, I want to give you some stuff. I'm such a great bro. You give it away to him, you've got a tax bill, even if you didn't want anything. So,
Thanks.
Yeah.
Think
That's what your brother would say.
lesson to learn is definitely a lot of information there, Shawn, but definitely that relationship with your accountant and or lawyer, as Glenn mentioned, is very important to have those discussions, because for every farming operation, it's going to be a little different. So to delve into every situation in this meeting, definitely there's a lot of different options available. But thanks again for the information, Shawn. And I think it's worthwhile when we again meet as a committee with KAP. We'll delve into this a little bit more as it's going through the progress federally, because it is being dealt with separately, so that we have a strong understanding and be able to present opinions here from the province on our provincial views. So thanks again, Shawn.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you.
And with that, we're actually right on schedule with heading into the resolution part of our meeting today, folks. So I'm going to I'll let Colin and Kevin join us to go over the resolutions. Colin is going to lead off with the resolutions portion of our meeting. I don't know, Neil, if you wanted to prelude anything ahead of time, or I can just hand the gavel, so to speak, over to Colin, and he can go forward with the resolutions that were included in your package, folks.
Yeah, go ahead, Colin. Everything looks good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Neil. To begin with, we've got 4 resolutions. The last 2 are considered late resolutions. So in order to move forward with them, I need a motion that will accept the last 2 resolutions, resolution 3 and 4. Do I have a mover?
Bill Campbell will move to accept late resolutions.
Thanks, Bill. Do I have a seconder?
Charles Fossey, I'll second.
I heard Charles Fossey, so we'll go with that as a seconder. Thank you. All right, Kevin, do you want to read the resolved for number 1?
Yes. Be it resolved that KAP research scope 4 emissions related to agriculture, and be it further resolved that KAP take a leadership role in the development of an agriculture strategy for scope 4 emissions.
Thanks, Kevin. Do I have a mover?
Yeah, Warren Ellis, MCGA.
Thanks, Warren. Seconded by
Charles Fossey, District 6.
Thanks, Chuck. Warren, would you like to speak to the resolution?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is a relatively new, scope 4 is relatively new. It's about the emissions that have been avoided through our, through technology or through our procedures in agriculture. And it's new enough that we really don't know an awful lot about the potential of it. But essentially, it could end up, what we want it to do is tell our story, agriculture's story of reducing emissions through sustainable farming practices over the last quite a few years. So that's basically what it is. We feel that KAP is the best to lead this. Manitoba canola growers, it's just outside our area of expertise. But we feel KAP is the best to lead this because you're already leading so many other areas in agriculture, not just canola, but all through the grains industry and livestock. So we feel it's the best to lead this. We're not 100% sure, whether there's a potential here or not. That's really the question. Is there a potential here? We do know in agriculture that we need to tell our story, but this scope 4 thing is early enough that it needs investigation, and that's what really we want to look at to see what the potential is. So that's I think that's basically it. There's a new thing, the bill. There's lots of problems I can see coming, which have to be dealt with. Bill 59, which is a greenwashing bill. Which is, as the RBC people said, is so new that we're not 100% sure how it's going to affect. But again, this is what we're looking for guidance from KAP. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Are there any other comments or questions in discussion? All right, we have one hand here.
Yeah, it's Mike Duguid. I've been involved with some of the scope 4 with the Canadian Cattle Association. And what you'll find out with this scope 4 is we may not be in agreement in the big picture of putting numbers on our agriculture, but if we don't do it in this country to our benefit, other countries like the EU will put it on us, and they may not be as favorable as we can make them in this country. So in that aspect, I'm in favor of looking at scope 4 emissions so that we can get a positive role for our agriculture. Doesn't matter which type of agriculture, it just gives us a more positive grip that we have control over.
Thank you. Charles, do you have a comment?
Just kind of a follow-up to some of the things that Warren said. I mean, RBC talked a little bit in their presentation about scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And I think as we go forward, more and more industries, food manufacturers, and others are going to be pushing down on their suppliers, basically farmers and other industries, to demonstrate how they are reducing their emissions. I really don't understand all the scope 4, and maybe there'll be a scope 5 and 6 coming down the road at some point, but these are very large, broad issues that we need an organization like KAP or CFA to address, because it's beyond, I think, individual commodities. It's beyond individual farmers. And as has already been said, you know, we got to go out there. We got to be continually promoting our story. And maybe at some point, as we have to make changes to our operations, we can find ways to monetize some of this to assist us in adapting to future demands. So just kind of a forward-thinking type of plan and discussion.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, statements? All right, seeing no other hands or anyone jumping in, here's the vote. Please vote if you're in favor, opposed, or abstain for resolution number 1. All right, so that has passed. So that that resolution is carried. Thank you. Resolution 2, Kevin, can you read out the resolved?
Be it resolved that KAP lobby the government of Manitoba to lower the Red River floodway channel inlet, and be it further resolved that KAP, if unsuccessful with its first request, lobby the government of Canada to increase the outflow capacity at the St. Andrews Lock and Dam.
Thanks, Kevin. It's moved by
Kevin Stott. I don't know if you got that. Kevin Stott.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. There was a seconder.
Chuck Edwards.
Thanks, Chuck. Kevin, would you like to speak to the resolution?
Yeah, at our last District 4 meeting, we were just talking about water being held up within our area south of Winnipeg here. We did actually go out for a drive and look around, and the floodway gates were open. The pathways at the forks were flooded, but if we went down to Lockport, there was a 6 to 8 foot difference between the south side to the north side. We wondered if they would put a control system at the inlet of the floodway so it still could serve a purpose of breaking up ice, but in summertime when ice is gone, they could lower it and maybe get some more water bypassing the locks. So this was a question was just to create a way to let more water through the hump at the inlet where the floodway meets the red.
Thanks, Kevin. Any discussion?
Hello.
Butch.
Kevin, you want to sort of lower the water on the north, on the American side, so to speak, or the border side. But in recent years, maybe we should be careful what we ask for. In recent years, even this summer, there was worry that the water would get too low and there would be not enough water for the communities such as Morris and all those down the river. I'm just thankful that it rained, because we'd have a disaster if that water gets too low. So maybe that's not where you're headed, but I think we should try to keep the water on the south side as high as possible, that it doesn't affect our, that not that it shouldn't flood our land, but there's a big danger that river ain't deep enough when everybody's drawing water out of it for domestic purposes. So we should be very careful about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Butch.
We were hoping if they put a gate there, they could still control the height.
Oh, there, and where's the no gate? There is Lockport. Isn't that a gate?
Lockport's on the red. If they put a gate on the floodway.
Oh, well, yeah, but.
And when it is high, they could lower it. And when it is low, they could raise it.
Oh, okay.
They could still control the height.
Is there any other discussion?
It's Shannon. I have my hand up. Sorry.
Shannon, go ahead.
Thank you. Has this discussion happened, or info been reviewed with Manitoba Association of Watersheds in terms of their thoughts on this? I know at the Manitoba Association of Watersheds, there has been discussion about agreements between, as has been brought up here, between the states and Manitoba about the waterways coming in. And I believe there is currently only one, and it is not on the Red River. So I'm wondering if we should maybe discuss this with Manitoba Association of Watersheds. It directly relates to their mandate, and as well as the district that might be impacted by it.
Thanks, Shannon. And if you have your hand up and I can't see you, feel free to jump in. I can only see about 10 people at a time here.
I don't have my hand up because I can't figure out how to do that, but I kind of, in the same vein as Shannon too, like I think like this is a really, really complicated, there's a lot of opportunity for unintended consequences here. Like there's lots of different stakeholders involved, and rather than create a resolution to just lobby for this one thing, maybe we could create a resolution to find out a little bit more about this in some way. Like the watershed districts is a great suggestion, Shannon.
Kevin Peters.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe add a little bit from our district, bringing this resolution forward. Some of the meaning behind it would be, we would love a larger, big picture provincial water plan, which I think the Conservatives had in the past, and currently I don't know that the current government has taken that on as well, but from talking to some KAP people, I think we're going forward asking for it. And so this was sort of maybe a way to get something from the grassroots here to just push up against our government and ask for a bigger plan.
Sorry, it's Shannon.
Yep, go ahead.
I understand your point. I just really believe, as has been mentioned, that there are significant implications with this, and I really believe that it is something like this should be discussed with Manitoba Association of Watersheds before we move a resolution for our own organization to work on it. And I'll be voting against this for that reason.
Sorry, Mike Clark, Manitoba Beekeepers Association. I am also a board member on the Assiniboine Watershed District. We would probably like to review this as well for implications. I do know we are always building small dams to retain water so that river variabilities do not happen in large rainfalls and such events. So yeah, I would say that we should do more studies on this before passing.
Thanks, Mike.
Colin?
Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
If I may, I would suggest making a motion that this resolution be referred to the Environment Committee so that we can look at the various options and then come back with the recommendation to the Advisory Committee on what is the appropriate way to approach this. So like, we're not going to be setting policy without having a full understanding of the impact.
Right, so that's
motion to refer to committee.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Seconder.
Shannon will second.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Discussion, or do we need discussion on sending to committee?
I believe we do. I'm not positive.
Okay, let's have a discussion.
Sorry, Colin, I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
I want to know, do I have the ability to share this with Manitoba Association of Watersheds, or not? That's my question. And if not, that's fine. I won't, but that's my question.
Shannon, I guess you're free to, I mean, this is a public meeting, so you're probably free to discuss it, but that would be the role of the Environment Committee, would be to talk with, the water resources, watershed districts, and maybe government to see, what are there rules in place? Are there, I'm trying to think the right word, but agreements between the Manitoba and the Canadian government with the US government on water levels? There's a whole lot of issues here that have to be looked at and discussed. Even what levels are recommended for Lake Winnipeg, so that hydro has adequate water for their needs. So, I mean, it's a very, very broad statement when you start getting into controlling water flows. Like I say, there's international border agreements and all sorts of things that have to be looked at. So that's why you have a committee to look at all these various points and bring forward the appropriate information for discussion and decisions down the road.
Thanks, Chuck. Any further discussion on the motion to move this resolution to the Environmental and Land Use Committee? Bill.
Yeah, excuse me. This question is more for the executive or the management team. But has there been recent conversation with the new current government with regards to a water management strategy? Because we had seen very restrictive policies by the NDP government when it was in place. Then the Conservatives came in, and there seemed to be ability to conversate and have some type of management practices. And I guess my question is, following along the lines of to the Environment Committee, has there been any discussion with the NDP government that is currently in place And my understanding, isn't there to be a Canadian water strategy as well to be housed in Winnipeg? So, and I think this particular year highlights once again how we need to have a Manitoba water management strategy moving forward. So just curious on that aspect.
I think Colin Hornby, are you the best person to answer this?
Yeah, so thanks, Bill, for the question. I know that, so the previous water strategy had some targets or some check-ins, I think, after a year. So I was just waiting to kind of look at some analysis from our friends over at Emily, the Emily Project. Actually, we had met to talk about this at one point. So I'm not sure if Kyle was still here, but I met with Kyle previously to talk about this. In terms of actual engagement with government, the specifics around this hasn't come up yet directly with the provincial government. We did speak with the federal government about the water agency. I did meet with one of the associate deputy ministers of Environment, Climate Change Canada, who's now the deputy minister of agriculture, actually. So, but we've talked to the federal government a bit about water management as well. So, with the province, though, it hasn't directly come up, but it's something like with the environment minister and his team or her team. However, with agriculture, this is something I know that Brenna will be talking about ongoing with the department team with agriculture. So we have no reason to be concerned at this point with there's nothing to be concerned about at the moment. So.
Thanks, Colin, for that. And if we would, I'll give the gavel back here to Colin to deal with the motion on the table to move this resolution to committee.
All right, yeah. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is to move this resolution to the Environmental and Land Use Committee. And I'd like to remind everyone that only delegates can vote. So here's the resolution. And that has been carried, so it will move to the Environmental and Land Use Committee. Thank you. So now the first late resolution, Kevin.
Be it resolved that KAP lobby the government of Manitoba to create a specialty license plate that would support the Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program.
Thanks, Kevin. Moved by
Charles Kinsler, District 3.
Thanks, Charles. Seconded by Wait a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Charles, would you like to speak to the resolution?
Yeah, sure. It was brought up as a way to provide funding for a rural mental health program, not any program in specific, but plate would also bring awareness to farmers as a sort of a moving billboard. Minimum of 1,000 plates would need to order, and that would provide about $30,000 worth of donated money to the charity foundation of whatever choice there once all the plates were sold. That's pretty much it.
Thanks, Charles. Any other discussion?
Shannon, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Question.
Shannon.
And I don't remember because at one point we asked about ordering our own personalized plate, and we weren't able to do it for farm use plates. So my question is, these plates, and I'm in support of it, but I would like to know whether or not they can be used for farm use vehicles.
I'm not really sure. I haven't really done a lot of research into it yet.
Chuck Fossey?
Yeah, thank you, Colin. While I appreciate what the district wants to do with fundraising through a special license plate, I have to oppose this resolution. I feel that we have a limited staff and limited time to spend on lobbying the government for a specialty license plate. I would say we could support the creation of a specialty plate, but I can't support that KAP spend a lot of time lobbying and putting effort into getting this approved. So I would be opposed to this resolution.
Thanks, Chuck. Any further discussion?
Sorry, it's Shannon again.
Yeah.
I just want one of our goals is farmer mental health, or our focuses. So, and this is directly related that too. So Chuck, I would disagree with our staff not working on this.
Thanks, Shannon. Any further discussion?
It's Maureen from Manitoba Beef Producers. Just wanted to jump in with an observer comment. There was a story in the Free Press in the last few days about specialized plates. And at this time, I don't believe the province is entertaining applications for new plates like this. Doesn't mean they won't in the future, but I believe right now it's currently paused.
Thanks, Maureen. Any other discussion? Shannon, I see you still have your hand up. Do you have another comment?
No, sorry, I forgot to lower it.
No problem. All right, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on this resolution. And that is in favor, 59%, so that is carried. All right, our final resolution, Kevin.
Be it resolved that KAP collaborate, organize, and facilitate stakeholder groups in the KAP network, such as MFGA, via a soil health roundtable format to ensure the full scope of soil health activity and farmer-led practices and initiatives are included and considered in provincial advocacy efforts with the provincial government, including MASC, as well as properly positioned in national efforts.
Thanks, Kevin. Do we have a mover?
Mike Duguid will move that, please.
Thanks, Mike. A seconder? Duncan Morrison, you've got your hand up. Is that a second?
Yeah, please. Sorry, I was clicking on.
No, that's all good. Thanks. Mike, would you like to speak to the resolution?
I can say a few words. In our opinion, we like the cooperation with KAP under MFGA. to show the value of our soils. It's been thrown through the Senate already with Senator Black and Senator Simons, the very valuable asset that our soil produces. And I think that they're worried about the degrading of our soils in our agricultural land. And it's kind of important in a big picture. You take MASC, they are under studies basically for some of the aspects of regen farming, how it can reduce costs for them and for ourselves. And we feel that more organizations that support soil health, the better. Like it's stated in the Senate report, yeah. And when you look at the state of some of the soils, it's very important to watch out for our, I guess you could call it desertification in the big picture, but actually just the value of soil that it and the grasslands especially, you know, you take some of that, the value it has on our biodiversity, our clean water, and we're talking about the Red River problems. Some of that goes back to keeping the soil covered and how we can work with improving those soil bases to prevent some of the erosion and actually topsoil loss into the water systems. And that's where we feel that more organizations that speak about it, the better it is with federal and provincial governments.
Thanks, Mike. Any further discussion? Duncan?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Yeah, I mean, everything Mike said is something that we've talked about at our board table. For those that don't know me, I'm executive director of Manitoba Forage and Grassland Association. We've had those talks, and our group includes different commodity members from beef, dairy, sheep and bison, and where they all land up is on soil. From an organization, Mike brought forward a lot of the key farmer points. From an organization, we're looking at the collaboration and leadership that KAP provides. We've heard 4 issues today, or 4 organizations that we are not in conversation with, CANZA, CFA, and also we've, I was very interested in the scope 4 emissions and learning more about that. So we're involved in a lot of discussions at our board and at our farmer level. And we think that this will help string together some of the main players in a soil health discussion. So I just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Duncan. Any further discussion?
I can't put my hand up, but I do have a question at least.
Sure, go ahead.
If someone, I mean, do you have a specific idea of like some specific action that would be taken here? It seems a little bit nebulous, collaborate and organize and facilitate. What specifically are you thinking that KAP should do in this particular case? Can you even give one example of something?
Well, I can take that if you want, Mike, and you can go forward.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and it's nebulous partly because I think this is our second ever KAP resolution, so maybe we're a little newbie on the block as far as putting this forward and being a little bit more direct. But this is absolutely timing focused, and I think that one of the components of the Senate report was to have some provincial leadership, and I think that KAP is properly positioned by all of you around the table to maybe be that group that pulls everyone together. As far as an example, I mean, we know that with the groups discussing such things, even as going as far as the full range of today, from CANZA right to MFGA asking for more discussion and collaborations. I think that it's clearly evident that soil is important to all of us. And I see KAP actually as a leadership role that we're looking upwards saying, hey, you know what, you have all the people in your network, let's talk.
Thanks, Duncan. Jill, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to talk, and certainly as chair, I'd like to kind of sit back and reserve comments on the whole process here. But I guess I just want to identify firstly that KAP is taking a leadership role in this. We are engaged with Senator Black. The actual soil health report is out there. We certainly will make it available on the KAP alert, the link to get to it. We did have discussions with CFA, so it is definitely ongoing, and it is happening now that the report has been released out in June. We as an organization through the group at the office will be reaching out, whether that's through actual producer engagement. We're hoping to have that discussion and have some real wholesome discussions with the Senator Black. He is more than willing to come out to the provinces. So hopefully you keep your eyes on the KAP alert, and definitely in our correspondence that we'll hopefully be able to engage with producers and have some real wholesome discussions as to how do we accomplish some of those outcomes. But yes, KAP is definitely there to take on the leadership role there, Duncan. Definitely, and glad that this point was brought up, but we're definitely there. But thanks for bringing it up to the group.
Thanks, Jill. Charles, your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. I just wanted to mention that I recently received a survey. It had a number of questions in there about soil management. And so I was just trying to find it here about which outfit was doing the survey. Oh, here it is. So anyways, so definitely there is opportunities for producers to get involved on some of these things. This was put out, it's a survey being done for Canadian universities. So, you know, it's a kinetic research. It's something that if you guys want to just subscribe to being part of their survey system. I mean, I know farmers hate surveys, but these surveys, at least they pay you a couple of bucks to spend 15-20 minutes answering questions, but there's definitely ways for people to get involved in the discussion and to provide feedback to universities and government on soil management.
Thanks, Chuck. Duncan.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's up to us to kind of find our way there, Chuck. So I appreciate the heads up. The other thing too, that, we're also part of the Canadian Agri-Food Index group, so we're involved with some of the benchmarking and some of the studies at University of Manitoba, et cetera, University of Saskatchewan. And so, we are engaging as a little group, at just the power of voices, that's all.
Thank you. I think we'll do one more comment or discussion point, and then I'll have the vote if there's one more, something else. All right, with that, I'll put forward the question. And while we're waiting for the results in the chat there, Colin Hornby's put the Senate Soil Health Report. %78% in favor, so that is carried. Thank you. Jill, I will turn it back over to you.
Great. Great discussion, everyone. And like Colin had mentioned, that link is in the chat if anyone chooses to take a look at that. And like I said, keep your eyes peeled for further discussion on that report and our leadership there. We will go now to cross-provincial update. I'm just keeping in mind of the time. We do have consideration of a new group membership that we will go to after this. So in your attachments that you received for this meeting, there was actually a detailed report from Manitoba Crop Alliance for you to review. I will go through the members that are here. If there's anything in addition to comment on, if you want to put up your hand, just so that I know if we have individuals for those organizations. If you want to raise your hand, is anyone from Dairy Farmers of Manitoba? I'm going to breeze through these pretty quickly, so just throw up your hand. Potato producers. Oh, Susan, yes, go ahead, Susan.
Nope, nothing to report, but thanks, Joe.
Report, okay. We have Love Day Mushrooms, Manitoba Beekeepers. Was there anything to bring up? I know we have
not much. Honey flow is not what we're expected, and in the northern portions, we're looking at crop failures along with the farmers.
A Manitoba Bison Association. Canola Growers Association.
Yeah, we've got a couple of things going on. Our Hello Canola program is running, which is a collaboration with the three provinces. And we've created a new position, and we're looking for a new employee for research and extension coordinator. And we're running independent canola trials this year, which are the only ones in Canada.
Thank you, Warren. Manitoba chicken producers. Crop Alliance, was there anything addition to add to that? I don't know if we have anyone on the call from Crop Alliance.
No, I'm here. Lee Smith.
Was there anything
yeah, no, there's I have nothing further to put other than what Pam brought forward, but I would encourage everybody to visit our website, and we do have nominations open for delegate positions, so I would encourage people to visit the website and ask questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Manitoba Egg Farmers. Forage Seed Association. Forage and Grassland Association.
Yeah. Excuse me, I've probably talked enough, but I'll be very quick. We are now our Regen Ag conference is in November, and also to some of the discussions today that about our MFGA Quanti model does have water forecasting as well. Reminder, it's on mfga.net, and it does include parts of the Red River Basin as well.
Thank you. Manitoba Oak Growers. Manitoba Pork Council.
Yes, just a couple of comments. With the election campaign going on in the US, we have some additional trade uncertainties where we're not sure what will happen down the road. There seems to be a resurgence of country of origin labeling participation, which is worrisome to us in our sector. One of the unhappy things we've heard about recently, I'm not sure how familiar others are with Proposition 12 coming out of California with about 2 years ago, but it took effect January 1st, which puts a whole different level of regulation on how pork can be produced and sold in the state of California. The ramifications, I mean, I think the intention was to reduce livestock agriculture altogether, or to deal at a blow. The cost of pork has increased very, very much in California, and official consumption is down. The sad part is that there are reports of a rapidly growing black market for pork. The fines for selling pork outside of the Prop 12 regulations are very excessive. And so supermarkets are extremely careful that they have all of their audits in place before they sell a package of pork. And a black market in meat is very worrisome when we're thinking of the prevalence of African swine fever globally. So that's a serious concern for us. Maybe an unintentional consequence of people who have no connection to agriculture designing the regulations, but that's certainly an ongoing concern with our relationships with our American pork producer friends as well. So far in 2024, we have no cases of PED virus in Manitoba, so we're knock on wood, happy that our elimination strategy seems to be working. But we are concerned that Ontario has a lot of cases of that and also of Delta coronavirus. And some of those Ontario hogs are coming to Manitoba for processing. So we're still on high alert in terms of some of the viruses we don't want present in our herds. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Mark. Manitoba Pulse Growers. Manitoba Seed Growers Association. Sheep Association.
Yes, thank you. Just Ingrid from Manitoba Sheep. Two quick things. Next month, August 16th and 17th, we have our annual show and sale coming up in Minnedosa. And second, very exciting news, we are hosting the National Sheep Show next year, 2025 in Manitoba. Similar location, Minnedosa, will be July 9 to 12. So just some exciting news I wanted to share. Thank you.
Great, that's very exciting for you and great for showcase the province of Manitoba. Turkey producers. And lastly, Prairie Fruit Growers Association. Okay, seeing no other hands, if someone should jump in later, just throw your hand up. We will go on to our districts now. District 1.
Yes, I can proceed, Jill. We've had quite a change since our last advisory meeting, and going from April 20th with concerns of a drought to current status of flooding, significant flooding in areas. We have weather stations that are indicating around 20 inches of rain. Earlier seeded cereals seem to be handling it well. Canola is very much impacted, saying that, but there are isolated areas. I have not been to the western side of the district, but crops look pretty good where they've been able to handle the water. Highlights again, water management, the leaching of nutrients, and all the rest of it that goes along with ponding and flooding. Forage production is pretty good. I think that most people that have indication of a decent crop have applied fungicides. A couple of issues that have come up. Just wondering if anybody's heard about a labor dispute with Viterra. It's impacting local deliveries at our elevator. And just noticed that there's been a significant hatch of grasshoppers. I think the production of the crop and the cereal staging will be not impacted by the grasshoppers, but they're around and about. And this latest surge of warm weather and humidity has certainly benefited the soybeans and the corn. It looks like it should make it if there's an average fall season. So everything's pretty green or absolutely black. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. District 2. Scott, did you have a report from District 2?
Well, we're right beside District 1, so everything looks great where we are too. But I don't think I can add anything more. Bill, like, yeah, everything looks good except for the price.
Great, thanks, Scott. District 3. Colin, or was there someone from your district?
I can speak to it. Yeah, I think it's kind of the best of times, the worst of times. We've got about 15 inches of rain on our farm here, and it was wet getting it in, and I think there were guys that struggled to put it in, but the crop that's come now is looking pretty good. Spraying for pea aphids and some diamondbacks here now, but other than that, I think it's going to be a probably an above average crop in our district.
Thanks, Colin, for that. District 4. Kevin Peters, did you want to comment?
Sure. Yeah, we're pretty much a mixed bag here too. I would say we've got some early cereals that are looking quite good, but we've got a very average or possibly below average canola, and some of the later crops, corn in particular, has been turned around a little bit with the heat and humidity, but still not holding my breath for anything too great around here.
Great, thank you. District 5. Was there someone from District 5? I saw Hubert on earlier. Seeing no hand. District 6.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. We haven't had a district meeting for a while, so I can't really speak to the western part of the district other than what I've seen driving around. For the most part, I would say all the early seeded cereals and canola are looking in very good shape, though maybe the canola is a little uneven. The later seeded crops, especially late seeded canola, it's late and not as well developed as we would like to see, and it was very slow coming out of the ground. I would say, like everybody else, corn and soybeans were slow, but the last couple of weeks of warm weather have really speeded up their growth, and they are starting to look like they will actually reach maturity and produce a crop. So we'll just have to wait and see. But like I say, the early stuff, really good. Later stuff, it's a real mixed view. A little bit of crops not seeded in certain areas, but for the most part, I would say we probably got 97, 98% of the field seeded. So let's hope that the harvest goes well and dries up.
Thanks, Chuck. We'll go on to District 8 now. District 8. We had someone on earlier from District 8. Anyone from District 9? Okay, we'll go on to District 10.
Shannon Piziak. Yep, it's District 10. Thanks, Jill. So in our area, so our MASC is located in Arborg currently. In the Interlake region, we have 125,000 acres unseeded, which is 40% of our acres did not get seeded. We have had many inches of rain. It rains probably every second or third day here. The crops that are in, some of them are looking okay, but depending on where you are when the cells of storm went through, depends on what your crops are looking like. So even many of the crops that are in are really being stressed by all of the moisture that we have. As was mentioned by the Beekeepers Association, the honey production, of course, is very slow here. Related to the lateness of the crops, as well as there's not a whole lot of crops in. The forage production is looking pretty good. Some of it was impacted by hailstorms that went through. And in terms of our livestock and production for feed, there's some really nice production out there, but the farmers are having a bit of a hard time trying to get it off just because it's raining every second day. So really struggling in this area this year.
Thank you for that, Shannon. And again, KAP's working really closely with Manitoba Agriculture and Mask to look at some of the impacts that are happening, particularly in your area.
Sorry. Thank you, Jill. Just one other thing that I wanted to ask is during your discussions with Manitoba Association or with MASC, sorry, if so, the farmers, and I've heard this from a number of farmers in the area, anyway, what has happened with their excess moisture checks that are going out is that MASC is deducting all of the premiums from the check before they're issuing the amount. And certainly the farmers that I've spoke to do not have an issue with, well, some of them do, I guess, but typically our premiums are not due until October 31st, as everyone knows. There are a number of farmers who do not have an issue with the premiums for excess moisture being deducted off their excess moisture checks, but to deduct total premiums, including the premiums for those acres that they got seeded off the excess moisture check, they disagree with. So I'm not sure whether that discussion has happened with MASC or not. There are a number of farmers who have forwarded their concerns up to MASC, but I'm wondering if KAP has any input on that.
I can actually, I'll pass that on to Colin to check into, and we can certainly get back to you or have that definitely in our KAP alert for information, but we can check on that for you, Shannon.
Thank you.
Okay, lastly, we have District 11 and 12. I don't know if there was anyone on the call from either one of those districts. I don't see any hands. With that, we will thank you for your input. And if something certainly comes up or it's something that is happening in your area, for sure, contact the KAP office with anything that might be coming up in the interim. Next on our agenda is consideration of a new group member application. We have individuals from the Manitoba Nursery and Landscape Association on the call. If you would like to unmute yourself, I believe, do we have Casey on the line? And I don't know, yep. I don't, Marcel was, okay, Casey, I see you there. If you want to, we'll give you the floor, so to speak, to tell us a little bit about, you have approached KAP for membership, so this is part of the process, and Nevin Martins as well is on the call. So if you have some information, and certainly if we have any questions from the membership that's here, so go ahead, Casey.
Thank you very much, Jill. Thanks for having us on the call today. Like you said, my name is Casey Norman. I am the president of Manitoba Nursery and Landscape Association. MBNLA is what we call it. It's a nonprofit. We have a small working board. There's 7 of us. We have a half-time ED. That's our only paid position. That's Marcel, who's also sitting in and listening today. We'll hear from Nevin in just a minute, but like you said, Jill, I'll give you a little bit of background. A lot of our resources, we go into planning a grow show conference every February. We're also really involved in promoting the landscape horticulture Red Seal program. A big hurdle for our profession is not necessarily viewed as a skilled trade. So we work to provide as well as promote training opportunities for our members. We're trying to educate the public about the benefits of hiring green professionals, and with labor shortages and just the public outview of the profession, we want to make sure they know that types of careers in our field are definitely worth pursuing. So our members, we've got growers, greenhouses, garden centers, tree nurseries, so ton of producers, primarily servicing ornamental horticulture, so plants that end up being installed by landscape companies as well as the public, but in residential spaces, public, commercial. Our members also include, suppliers of landscape-related materials, so irrigation supplies, concrete pavers, equipment, fertilizers, pesticides. A big portion of our members, we have about approximately 100 members currently. A big portion are just landscape contractors, so those that build and maintain outdoor spaces. We have members who do pest management, snow and ice control, landscape designers, educators, arborists. So as you can see, we have a lot of growers involved, and it's also sort of a larger umbrella with other people in our in this sector. So our members, they automatically become members of the Canadian Nursery Landscape Association. So that's the national association, and there in each province, almost every province has their own. So being part of that, certain discounts are available to our members, and our association associated with the larger one, we do get some assistance to reach some of our goals. I'll hand it over to Nevin next, because one of the goals we've been struggling with is government relations. So Marcel, he had joined us just over a year ago, and he had a lot of experience with that sort of thing, reaching out to officials and advocating for certain things. But we don't really have the capacity to fully tackle everything that we want to for our members. So I'll let Nevin talk a little bit about some of the goals that are aligned with KAP.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. My name's Nevin Martins. I'm one of the 7 board members at large right now for MBNLA. I think, we've had Marcel now for, I guess it's been about 2 years. And one of the things he pointed out to us, which was great, was some of the similarities that we had with members of KAP. Us being a seasonal profession such as yourselves, the weather plays a big role. But then when we started looking at some other things, dealing with pesticide restrictions, nutrient management, all of the carbon tax items that have come down over the last few years, labor shortage, some industries trying to get temp foreign workers in, right to repair was another one that we're seeing more of, that the newer equipment is coming in, and a lot of it in our industry is electric more than it is fuel, and being able to actually do your own repairs on equipment. Water restrictions has been another big one. We're starting to see that more in our industry, and I can imagine that will affect the ag industry a lot more. Environmental impact advocacy, right? There's been a lot as to are we just carbon producers, or are we also, are we giving back? And I know the ag industry has been attacked at times for that. Same with us. So we've seen that there is a lot of similarities, I think, between parts of our profession, especially when we start looking at our nursery producers, sod farm producers, not just landscapers and such. And as Casey alluded to, we have struggled, because being a smaller association, with getting our advocacy and dealing with government. We're in that same Ministry of Ag sector, sometimes Ministry of Environmental, but we're a lot of times hearing about things coming down after they've come down. And we're looking, one of the biggest reasons we're looking to partner with KAP is to hope to add to your membership group, but also be able to hear what's coming down the chain instead of finding out about it in the paper later. So I think that kind of lends the biggest thing is we're looking to have a bigger voice, and we're looking to partner with KAP to hopefully kind of use our shared issues to do that.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. If there's any questions from the membership that's here, I guess what we want as an end game here at the end of this discussion is to have by way of a motion, a recommendation from the body to forward this for recommendation to the board for including the Nursery Landscape Association for membership. I will pass it on I have Jake, and then I have Chuck next, Charles. So Jake, if you want to go first, and then Charles.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Jill, I would like to make that motion to send this to the board, please.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Seconder?
That was my intent, Jill, was to make the motion, but I can second it as well.
Okay. And I guess from that, is there any discussion from that motion? Bill Campbell, comment?
Just curious as to the time frame. Does that start when it's accepted by the board for the 2024 year, or would that be starting at the AGM, or what's the time frame, I guess, for logistically making this happen?
I guess it will be first, if this motion is carried, it'll go to the board, and once it's approved by the board and paid, then they are effectively a member. Am I right in those assumptions, Neil? I did read the bylaw last night.
Yeah, that's right, Joe.
I passed. Thank you very much. So are there any opposed to that motion that is on the floor? Being none, that is carried. So that recommendation will be taken to our next board meeting, which is later this summer. With that, there was other business on the schedule. I'm seeing if Les is still on the call from District 2. I don't see his name there, but he did bring up just an update from District 7, and I guess I could probably just comment on the three vacancies that we do have on the board. But we are actively seeking in those areas and having engagement in all three districts, whether that's through commodity association partners or events that we go to. And to that note, even in District 11 and 12, there has been recent engagement through our discussions, whether that's at Churchill, at the meeting that was in Dauphin, where definitely, even though we do not have participation at the board level, the executive, whether that's myself and the staff at KAP, have been and have continual conversations with individuals and producers in those areas to make sure that we know what's happening with boots on the ground there. So seeing that, I'm just looking at the comments. Thank you, Marcel, for your comments, and definitely we will if we need to, we will definitely reach out to you at our next board meeting if we need more information from you. But thank you all from your association from participating today. And with that,
hello.
Bill Campbell, I guess, is the only hand I see here. Is that
harder?
Bill or?
Butch Harder?
Oh, sorry, Butch. Bill's hands up first, and then we'll go to you.
Hey, Jill, just to follow up on the CFA summer meeting, and you had mentioned one of the highlights was data. And I'm wondering in those conversations if ownership of the data and compensation and all of that complex formula as to the ag industry compiles all of this information, and sometimes it gets transferred without us awareness or being paid for providing this information. So did that come up in conversation, and any other highlights from the CFA summer meeting?
Yeah, thanks, Bill, for that question. Definitely the main discussion at that round table was on certainly data. It was centered towards the government's financial investment in that research and collecting of that data. Ownership, definitely the driving factor being that information is the farmer's ownership in that data. So ownership and security definitely were resounding in all of our conversations and going forward. And I think Butch, did you have you had a quick question?
Can you hear me? And maybe this has been dealt with. I did not attend the beginning of the meeting, but I'm a little disappointed, and I haven't been at the Bunge-Viterra merger. I have met very little from KAP on that. It's a real major issue, and there's some articles. I mean, you're going to have a monopoly in the business, and I've heard very little from KAP. The other thing that, and I was going to ask the seed people, and I didn't get in on time, is that I get the magazine Grain World, Seed World, and they keep talking about our seed governance model needs repair, and I don't know what needs repair. We're growing some of the highest yields we've ever done. And at the same time, there's an article that says that we need the public sector involved in cover crop breeding. And my suspicion is that the governance model that they want to change is I get the impression they want to put more industry people on there, and pretty soon farmers will be left out of the picture. And I'd like to ask from the seed growers what it is that is so bad. We're getting 80 bushel acre yields. We have barley this year that's going to well over 100. What is the problem, except that I think industry would like to be in on the take? And another aside, they never talk about changing a governance model, maybe so we can reduce seed costs. Never talked about it. Anyway, that's just my comment.
Thanks for your comments, Butch. I'm going to actually, I don't want to, first, I guess on the seed regulation conversation, there are, and we are working on our submission from KAP's end. Neil, did you want to maybe just update briefly on that? And then on the on the Bunge-Viterra merger, Colin, if you wanted to just comment, we at the KAP office have been in continual conversations with heads of both of the companies, and there is a process in place reviewing and looking at that merger. So first, Neil, if you wanted to talk just briefly on the seed regulation, I want to keep in mind totally the time that we are a little bit over, but certainly if we want to address that at this time. And then Colin, if you have a brief comment on the merger at this point in time, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. So CFIA is doing this multi-year consultation, improving the seeds regulations. They also did a recent consultation on plant breeders' rights. So the most recent consultation on the seed regulatory modernization, questions surrounded cancellation of varieties, variety certification, importing, exporting varieties, whether there's a common seed grade name, the sampling and testing of seed. These were all very broad and not at times specific questions. I'm more than happy to share the documents with you, Butch, that we sent to the CFIA. Yeah, and then next year, they'll be releasing in the Canada Gazette what actually they want to propose to the seed regulations. And at that time, we'll have additional comments that we can provide to the CFIA. Well, Colin, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks. Colin, if you wanted to briefly comment on the merger at this time.
Yeah, thanks, Butch, for raising this. Yeah, we've, like I say, this is something that I know Neil's done some substantial analysis of within our organization. We have met with Bunge and Viterra both to kind of understand their perspectives on it as well. And, we do have concerns around some of the things that were in the report that came out from the Competition Bureau, including the G3 shares issue. But it's not something that we're ignoring by any means. It's something we're actively working on and trying to sort of make sure that the process also plays out in a way that we're letting it play out as it should. So, but if you have other questions on this, you can always connect with the office and we can chat with you further as well, Butch. That's no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those updates, Neil and Colin, and thanks for the questions. And I'm just looking at for any other hands. And I think this is probably a good opportunity to thank everyone again for participating. And I will ask for a motion to adjourn our meeting today.
Les Ferris, District 2.
Thank you, Les. Seconder?
Kevin Peters, District 4.
Thank you, Kevin. And we're adjourned. Thank you very much. And here's hoping to some more seasonable, drier weather here as we get through the rest of the summer. And thank you, everyone.